see how it goes this week. So, what else? Let's see. Okay, yes, just normal warning messages popping up. And we're live. And now I need to run over to YouTube and see. And it looks like Cecilia is here, I believe, if I am reading the chat correctly. Cecilia, are you really here? For real, for real? Maybe, maybe not. Let's see. So, how is everybody doing tonight? Hippie Go Lucky is here. Hi. I'm so sorry about last week, you guys. I'm not sure who all made it over to Periscope or not, but we did end up going for, I don't know, like an hour ish, maybe more or so over there. But I'm home now, so back to my normal internet connection and normalcy in general. So, okay, Overcoming Understanding is here. Hello. Ashley is here. Oh, Hippie Go Lucky says, "Hey Dana, I want to know the story behind the fox painting in the background." Okay, well, I will tell you. It's kind of a complicated story for like a cartoon drawing, but where do I start with this? The Aesop's, Aesop's fables, Aesop's fable, yeah, I think it's plural. Aesop's fables. Well, there is one that's called Fox and Grapes, and it's a story about a fox who is trying to get. He sees grapes up in a, I guess like in a really high grapevine, and he wants the grapes, and so he's trying to get them, but he can't. And so, because he can't have what he wants, it causes him a lot of mental distress. And so he tells himself, well, I bet those grapes are sour anyhow. And so that's where the term sour grapes comes from. Right, right. So it's also a metaphor for the concept of cognitive dissonance. And so that story is just kind of an illustration of cognitive dissonance, which is my absolute like favorite topic because I think it's so fascinating. Yes, it's about cognitive dissonance. And because once we understand how cognitive dissonance plays into our life, it's like cognitive dissonance is like the key to everything. For real. Like once you understand that, then you understand it's so crazy. Like you can see why your life is not working, and you can slow down and observe yourself when you start justifying and rationalizing things that you're doing. Super interesting. So there was a gal, her name was Lynn, and she had emailed me, and she was an illustrator. And so she had said, if I wanted, she would make some drawings for me if I wanted them. And so I had said, hey, I think it'd be really cool to have a drawing of a fox that actually gets the grapes. So basically, it's kind of this metaphor for seeing reality for what it is and being able to respond appropriately, and therefore actually getting what you want, because we're not lying to ourselves, because that's what cognitive dissonance is. It's a form of kind of gaslighting ourselves, but it happens at a very subconscious level. It's not like we do it intentionally. It's very insidious. It's very subtle. So Ashley is here. Ashley's asking, what is cognitive dissonance? We are just starting like fresh out of the gate with like topics. Okay, cognitive dissonance is such an interesting topic. I just spoke a little bit about it, but let me back up a little bit and explain a little bit more. It is a term that was coined in the late 1950s by, let's see if I can remember this, by a psychologist by the name of, I want to say, Leon Festinger. And he was a guy who was observing cults. And one of the cults he was observing, they had this belief where they believed on a certain day and time that there was going to be this massive flood and that the world was going to end. And of course, the day came and went, and the flood did not. And so then he observed like what happened. And about half of the cult members ended up, they were like, wow, I don't know how we got tangled up in this. Like this is really embarrassing. And then they went back to their lives. They went back to life as normal. They went back to their families, their jobs, everything else. The other half of the cult members took the absence of the flood as proof that their faith and whatever their belief was saved the world. And so the absence of the flood, even though that was the opposite of what they had originally believed, that absence of the flood was proof that their beliefs had saved them. And so it reinforced their beliefs. And so he was trying to figure out why, like how and why was this? And so what he came to realize was that when people have a belief, so when people have a belief in something, especially if it's deeply tied to like their identity. So the stronger the belief, the harder it is to let go of it. And so cognitive dissonance, it's a fancy term for cognitive meaning, thinking or mind, and dissonance meaning distress. So it's mental distress that we experience when our beliefs do not match our behaviors. And this is something that we all experience, some of us on a regular basis, but it especially happens when people are involved in an abusive relationship of any kind. So, yeah, it's super super interesting. So let me give you some examples here of how this plays out on maybe an easier to see example. So let's say if I was wanting to lose 20 pounds, okay, which that would be great. Like, let's just say hypothetically, not so hypothetically speaking, I guess, not so hypothetically speaking, let's say if I wanted to lose 20 pounds. So if I had the belief that I was going to eat healthy and that I wanted to lose weight and all that, then I would need for my behavior to match that. So human beings, people, we really need our behavior to match our beliefs and our beliefs to match our behavior. And when they don't, that's when we experience that mental distress. And to resolve that mental distress, that's when we justify and minimize and deflect and deny. So if I were to believe that I wanted to lose 20 pounds and I joined a gym and I was, eating salads and I was doing all these things, right, that people normally do when they are trying to lose weight. If I decided I wanted ice cream, then I would have to somehow justify that. So I might tell myself, well, it's low calorie ice cream, or, well, at least I'm not getting the toppings on it, or, well, I'm going to get a small and not a large, or, well, I'm going to go to the gym, for twice as long tomorrow. So I'm able to develop a new belief to match my new behavior. So if my behavior is now going to be, I'm going to eat ice cream, that does not compute with, I want to also lose 20 pounds, right? If that was my thinking, that eating ice cream would somehow knock me off my diet, right? So the new belief would be, well, I'll go to the gym twice as long tomorrow, or a little bit of ice cream's not so bad, or everything in moderation. So I'm going to pick a new belief to match my new behavior and to resolve that cognitive dissonance. So here's how that plays out in an abusive relationship. So let's say, for example, if I have the belief that, I want to stay in a relationship. Now, you see this all the time on shows like Jerry Springer, and where they're like high conflict shows, right? Where they're bringing people on, and and it's very clear to everybody else in the audience that this other person is the problem, right? We'll just use the example of a guy. Let's say he's got, 10 kids by 10 different women, and he's got this pattern of cheating. Let's say he's been married for 15 years, right? And he's got, 10 kids under the age of 10 by 10 different women. And so it's very clear, like DNA testing has proven it, that these children are his. And so he might be telling his wife, all kinds of stuff, right? And the reason she's believing that is because she doesn't want to leave the marriage. And so for whatever reason, maybe she can't afford to, maybe she's scared to, maybe she's, it's, she stayed with him this long. I think that's a lot. That's a big thing for a lot of people. So it's the idea of, well, if I leave now, we've already been married for 15 years and he's already gotten 10 other women pregnant. So that's become the new baseline for normal. So in her mind, she might be telling herself, if I can just these other women are the problem. They're promiscuous. They're throwing themselves at him. You know, she's justifying what's happening because if she were to actually get mad at him and hold him accountable, then she'd have to leave. But she's not. If she's not wanting to leave, she's going to keep accepting excuses. And of course over time and this is kind of the whole analogy of the frog in boiling water when it comes to abusive relationships. So the more she is, this kind of awful behavior has become her new normal, the less she's surprised. So it's and you see where this kind of thinking, the cognitive dissonance gets really scary and really dangerous is when a person is in a physically abusive relationship where to outsiders, right, they might think, oh my gosh, he or she put their hands on you. They gave you a black eye, or they were threatening to kill you, or, they kicked down your door, or they shot your dog, these kinds of things. If a person's been living in that, this now has become their new normal. And so if they're going to stay, they're going to keep justifying this kind of behavior. So they might be telling themselves, well, it's because he has a lot of stress at work, or she had a bad childhood, or, then of course, too, if you have a manipulative person, they're going to be probably blaming us for their behavior, right? Well, you're difficult, you're manipulative, you're abusive. And this is kind of the typical, stereotypical thing for abusive people to say, right? It's look at what you made me do. And it's that shirking of accountability and responsibility for their behavior. And so it's very common for victims, for partners of abusive people, when they're in it and they've been in it for so long, they really lose sense of direction as far as what's normal, what's not normal, what's healthy, what's not healthy, and who is even the problem. Very interesting stuff. And it gets really complicated very fast, especially, and I've seen this a lot as well, where people then, in an effort to get clarity, will then go to counseling. And if they get a therapist who's easily manipulated and who's not familiar with emotional, verbal, or psychological abuse, especially, then the counselor is going to be thinking to them, or might even be saying, well, there's two sides to every story and there's two people in a relationship. And so they're going to be addressing it as if, you've got two reasonable, rational people that share the same reality. And that's not the case when you're dealing with an abusive relationship, because in an abusive relationship, you have the abusive person who has their own reality. Like we are not sharing a reality here. And it's very, very important that other people understand that, because you can't reason with an unreasonable person. You can't use logic with an illogical person. It doesn't work. So that's kind of a long-winded explanation, but I hope that kind of clears up cognitive dissonance. So next time you find yourself justifying your behavior, it's generally a form of cognitive dissonance, whether or not it's really mild or whether or not it's really intense. So, yeah, and it's absolutely crazy making. There's a lot of gaslighting that goes into it, because abusive people will flat out deny reality and spin it, which doesn't help with cognitive dissonance. So you can see how a lot of this it's a lot of moving pieces, and it gets very tangled very quickly, and it's very hard to it can be very hard to untangle, because there are just so many different components at play. So let's see. what people are saying. Oh, we got lots of people on. Hello, everybody. Um, Scrolling down here. Getting some questions. Let's see. Haley says, yep, my narcissist, who I have had no contact with for 3 months, just started messaging my friends about how he's suicidal and it's my fault. Well, and I hope that your friends can see how manipulative that really is. Because it's not just manipulative because he's a narcissist. Even if he wasn't, and I mean, there's so many different things that are like just wrong with that sentence, right? We all are responsible for our own behavior. And, it's like he's triangulating right there, right? With messaging your friends how he's suicidal and it's your fault. And then if they're kind of getting roped into this and then they're thinking, oh no, he's suicidal, let's give him all of this support or let's feel sorry for him, then that's kind of just this, very triangulating, you know, like not healthy behavior. And he needs to go. And of course, this may or may not be true if he's an emotional manipulator. If it's an emotional manipulator, then odds are it's not true. But I think whenever anybody starts threatening suicide, that's something that I would encourage people to take seriously. Just take it seriously and encourage your friends. And if he's saying, "Hey, I'm suicidal. I want to end my life," then they need to call 911. And so he's not holding them hostage emotionally. And then too, if he really is suicidal, then, and 911 will get there. They're trained to handle these kinds of situations. They can get him the help that he really needs, because him holding people emotionally hostage, being like, I'm so upset, I can't handle anything anymore, I'm suicidal because of her, then that's not fair to them. So I would just tell them, like, then call 911. And if it's a pity ploy and if it's a guilt trip and all these things, then my guess is after the ambulance gets there, he's gonna learn real quick that you don't make threats like that, and because people are gonna take you seriously. Lynn asked a great question. Hi, Dana. Concerning cognitive dissonance, I feel like I'm stuck. Like I just can't wrap my mind around the evil that he is. Like I just can't accept it. How do I move on and get unstuck? That is a fantastic question. Okay, let me stop the chat here for a second. It's hard for our brain to wrap around something like this when I think that there's a lot of us out there, myself included, where we knew that there were bad people or people with bad behavior in the world, but we didn't realize to what extent. And or we thought that we could see them coming. And it's very, very eye-opening and confusing and crazy making when, especially if you've had an emotional manipulator who came across as very charming and likable and seemed like your soulmate. Because what we see portrayed in movies and media is that the bad guys tend to look like bad guys, right? And the bad women tend to look like bad women, like they're dressed in black latex and they're just like you can tell, like this chick means trouble. Right? Or like this guy means trouble, like you can tell. But in real life, people don't look like that. Like you don't know who is who. And so trying to untangle that takes time, and it takes a while. I think this is part of the healing process. Is it just takes a while to kind of rehash and pull apart, and then rehash and pull apart and rehash and pull apart what you went through, because it's a lot to try to understand. Because once you understand, generally at the tail end of, oh wow, I've been manipulated for X number of months or years or decades, then you start, it's normal, right? Normal and natural to look back and start wondering, well, wait a minute, like how long has this been going on and to what extent? And that's when all of that rehashing and pulling apart and trying to make sense of things, especially if that cognitive dissonance is still there, where you're like, but maybe, like maybe, given enough time or love or understanding or therapy or rehab or church, that this person could change, right? Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe they're not a narcissist. Maybe they're just the average run of the mill, lying, cheating, addict, alcoholic, master manipulator, thief. Like maybe that's all they are, right? But the reality is, and this is very, very normal, it's probably one of the top questions I get from people, and I know I asked it myself as well, is because we have a hard time with labels, right? It's sort of this idea of, well, if this person, maybe I am overreacting, right? Like maybe because it's easier to think, well, maybe it's the problem is with me. Like maybe I'm overreacting because if I think that I'm overreacting, then I could fix that. Then I could just get better. I could do self-help or therapy or what have you, and then I could still stay. Versus again, if I am let this person own their behavior and realize that they're fully accountable for whatever they're doing, then realizing I can't be with a person like that. So to cut through that cognitive dissonance and to really start seeing them for seeing this bad behavior for what it is I always encourage people to write a list and write it down in like bullet point format. So you can pick it up at a moment's notice and you can quickly scan it. And so on this list, it's a letter kind of from like your healthy self to your cognitive dissonance self, right? And so telling your healthy self, saying, dear Lynn, here are all the reasons why you need to go. And you deserve better than this. Remember, here's some of the things that he did. This is why you have to stay gone. This is why you can never go back to him or anybody like him. And then you list out, because he cheated on you with your best friend, because he got another woman pregnant, because he lied and stole $5,000 from the kids' college funds, and then you put down every single, the goal here is to go for the most painful things that he did, because the goal is for you to read this letter and for it to shock you awake and be like, oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. Done. Like that's that. Yeah. I'm done. Like I'm done. So write a letter to yourself and then label it for when you miss him or her. Right. And so when you do miss this person, then you pick up the letter and you read it to yourself and you remind yourself. So this isn't something you necessarily read every day because you want it to keep that shock effect of snapping you awake. If you are finding yourself having to read it all the time, then you might want to consider, adding new things to it, something that keeps that shock effect there. I think support groups can be great, especially in the beginning of reminding you of why you need to go, because you'll find that in support groups, you've got a lot of other people that are all at various stages of understanding. And because we're telling different versions of the same story. And so it's a fantastic way to see different elements of your experience reflected back at you. And so you're going to see other people there that are, they just found out this morning. They just came across the term narcissist or sociopath, and now they just stumbled across YouTube or a blog or what have you, and they're like, "Oh, I just got here. I have no idea." It's they have no idea what's going on. They're shocked. They're stunned. They're confused. They're upset. And then you have people that have been through this for several years, and and they oftentimes they're the ones kind of like me, where it's like, I've been there, I've done that. Here's my advice from somebody who's been there and done that. And so you're going to get a wide range of advice and input from people at various stages of healing and understanding. So, and it's, of course, it's so much easier, right, to see issues and to see problematic behavior in other people. Like it's because we're not emotionally attached to their story, to their experience, right? Like that's why we can all watch Jerry Springer and be like, what is he thinking, or what is she thinking? They're nuts for staying. Like, this person's obviously lying, or this person's obviously problematic. It's because we don't have that emotional investment. We don't have cognitive dissonance because their stuff is their stuff. So it's the same in a support group, where it's a great way to cut through that cognitive dissonance, because you can see the same elements in your story in other people without having that emotional attachment, because it's not your story. So that would be my advice as far as helping yourself to get unstuck. And then the moving on part, I encourage people to get a vision of what you want your life to be. Like, what do you want the next chapter in your life to be? And to get as clear about that as you can, because like the Bible says, like, where there is no vision, people perish. And there's a lot of truth to that, where and it doesn't matter if you're Christian or Jewish or anything. I think that's a really fantastic quote, because we need something to steer into, especially if you're like a lot of us out there, right, who've gone through this, where when you get out of these relationships, you kind of look around, like, you're dazed and confused. You look around and your life is just a pile of rubble, and you're having to rebuild. But it helps to have clarity on what you want to rebuild it to. And then once you have kind of that direction, this idea of what you want to do, then you can start pouring your energy into making that happen. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents on it. But I hope that helps. I'll be curious to see how that works for you. So let's see. Mike says, my father has always put me down and screws with me very passive aggressively, silent treatment and belittling. I am also an Iraqi vet, and he tells people, an Iraq vet. He tells people I am a mentally ill Iraq vet to cover his ass. Help. Well, right. That's very difficult. I would encourage you, with anybody, I always encourage people to move yourself to a place where you can stay safe and sane, physically and emotionally and psychologically and everything else. So if he's, belittling and passive aggressive and emotional manipulator, then I would encourage you to figure out, where is that place where you can kind of back things up a bit, again, physically, emotionally, what have you, to where his behavior doesn't impact you in a negative way. And you don't have control over what he's telling other people, right? He's going to say what he's going to say. All you have control over is you, and how you respond to it, and how you can respond to these other people if they talk to you. But, and that might not be a challenge that you want to take on, like, you don't need to prove yourself to anybody. You really don't. You've already been through a lot, and you don't need to come back from a war over there and then come back and fight a war over here, especially with your father. So try to figure out, where is that line for you? Where is this a comfortable dynamic with you, with knowing that this is how he is. These are the things that he says, and it's not okay, and it's not fair, and it's not right, but that you don't have control over what he does. So again, moving yourself to a place where you are safe and sane, and then you can respond. It's the difference too, I think, between responding and reacting. So let me touch on this a little bit, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. So reacting, so when we talk about these concepts of gray rock, which applies to your situation. So gray rock is it's a technique where we become basically unresponsive. We become as reactive and we become as unreactive and as unresponsive as a gray rock, which meaning not at all, right? So it's helpful to to have a gray rock approach to things if you can anticipate what you're walking into. So knowing ahead of time, okay, this is the kind of stuff that my dad's going to say. This is how he's going to act. And, you know, you were in the military. So it's very much kind of like going to battle, right? So you are assessing your opponent, and then you're going to plan accordingly. You're going to develop some sort of strategy as to how to handle this situation. You're going to be backing away, and keeping yourself safe and sane at all times. And you're trying to anticipate his behavior and anticipate your behavior, because you know too what buttons, like where your triggers are, right? Like what things really activate you and send you into orbit. So knowing yourself and then knowing him, and then responding, not reacting. So reacting it's the last thing you want to do, right? So like if you're in combat, you don't want to be reactive. You don't want to put yourself where you're kind of painted into a corner, and now, because there hasn't been anticipation, there hasn't been a strategy in place, now you're reacting, which is just kind of these knee-jerk reactions to being under attack, right? So you want to go in being like, okay, this is what I think is going to happen. This is the game plan. This is how I'm going to respond. This is how, knowing that you don't have control over your opponent, right? So then now you're not going to react, you're going to respond, and you're going to try to respond in a very controlled way. And the more control in it, this takes practice. It takes practice. The more control you can have over yourself, and realizing, okay, like I'm in, like this is trouble, warning, right? I need to get out of here. Knowing yourself well enough to be like, okay, I need to disengage. Like I need to disengage the enemy and back up to a place where I'm safe and sane. This is, this is foolhardy to keep rushing in to fight this fight when it's either going to be a losing battle or it's not going to be safe for you. So I would that might sound extreme, but I would kind of think about this in combat terms. And I hope that helps. And I'm sorry that he's doing that. And, so just keep reaching out, keep getting the support that you need from people that do support you and encourage you and empower you. So let me scroll down here. "100 Smiles" says, they're talking about, I think, cognitive dissonance. "I blamed myself for everything, and now I see a bit more clearly that it wasn't me. That itself is revolutionary." Oh my gosh, yes, right? Hold on a second, let me stop the chat here. So I think it's a big thing for a lot of people. That might even be perhaps like the number one aha moment that I think I know at least for me, but I think for a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons I say at the end of every video that you're not crazy. Like this isn't you, because odds are you've been told this for a long time that, you're too emotional, you're too sensitive, you can't take a joke, you're abusive, you're manipulative, you're all these things. And so it erodes a person's sense of reality, because they don't know, like, am I the problem? Like is there this side of me, what is so wrong with me that I'm driving this person to have all of this bad behavior, or to cheat or lie or steal or become violent, or to become verbally abusive. I haven't really had this dynamic with anybody else, and I have it with them. And or maybe you have had it with other people if you have had a pattern of abusive relationships, which can be another level of crazy making, because if you've heard the same thing before, because abusive people tend to all pretty much say the same things. They tend to justify their behavior. I mean, it's kind of like their form of cognitive dissonance, because they're not okay with their beliefs and their behaviors. So they're justifying, they're denying, they're minimizing, they're deflecting, they're doing all of the same stuff too. So, yeah, just realizing like this is not me. Like, I'm not crazy. I'm not these things. And this is this other person's reality that they've been projecting onto me because they can't handle the the truth of their behavior. Like, they can't own it. So it's a very, very, very freeing feeling, because when you're going through something like this, it really can feel so isolating. Like, nobody understands, and nobody, that you're not, it's hard to find people to talk to about it, because I think oftentimes when we're going through something like this, because there is that need to rehash and pull out, and then pull out and then rehash and then untangle and then rehash and untangle, it burns a lot of people out, and they are like, I can't hear all of this drama and dysfunction anymore. Like, I don't want to deal with it. But if you're in it, it's like, you're like, but I don't want to deal with it either, but I need to make sense of it because it's my life. And, it's it's a very isolating place emotionally to be. So, but yeah, huge aha moment. Hey, Josh is here. Welcome, Josh. Rosie is here. And if this is the same Rosie, I'm not sure if it is, with the Spanish translations, then we need to talk later on, because I have some questions for you. Let's see. But Rosie asks, can the narcissist be controlled by a parental narc or a more powerful narc? Mine always took his mother's side. She would step all over men, and then she'd play the victim, and he would run to her aid. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense. If you've got, yeah, I mean, it's whoever has the greatest level of dysfunction wins, right? I mean, it's if she is really awful and nasty, and and still has this dysfunctional dynamic with her, then odds are he's gonna put up with it, and yeah, like her bad behavior is gonna win. Interesting stuff. Interesting dynamic. I'm glad I'm not at that table for Thanksgiving. That would be quite something. So let's see. Let me scroll up. Lots of people are hopping on. Nancy is here. Hey, Martine is here. Doug is here. Doug is half here. He says, I'm listening and lifting, so half here, but fully listening. Good deal. Nancy says, my husband was king of justification and making excuses. Couldn't stand it. Ugh. Rosie says, in regards to the problematic mother-in-law and I think husband, they both crushed me at the same time. I think she is more borderline and he turned out narcissistic. It all really confuses me. It's just tough. Yeah, it is. And so, and I know, and I get it, that words, that labels especially, can be really helpful when you're going through this. Because again, for a lot of people, myself included, when you're experiencing, and Spartan Life Coach, and I talked a little bit about this the other day, in our live stream, when you lack the vocabulary to define what's happening to you, it's like you stay stuck, because you're not able to articulate what's really going on. And so things can stay very confusing because we're not able to accurately describe it to ourselves or to other people. And so terms like borderline or narcissist or sociopath or histrionic or what have you, they can be very helpful, because it's sort of like, oh, ding ding ding, like that's what I've been dealing with, like that makes sense. And so it can add a lot of clarity, but at the same time the downside to labels is it can also trip a lot of people up. And so oftentimes people will stumble across a label, like a word like narcissist or sociopath, and there it's like everything makes sense. They're like, oh my God, yes, this is what I've been dealing with. I knew this wasn't normal. Like, I knew it. And so that's it. Like, you hear that word and you're like, ding, ding, ding. But then as time progresses, and especially as we're rehashing and trying to figure out what was really going on, and especially if we still want to stay, right? So if that fog of cognitive dissonance is, it kind of lifts and then it settles down, and then it lifts and then it settles down again. When it starts settling down again, that's when we start telling ourselves, well, but maybe maybe they're not a borderline. Maybe they're not an emotional manipulator. Maybe they're not a narcissist. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just being too difficult. I mean, nobody's perfect. And I mean, and then we start justifying things. And this is why I encourage people, the labels can provide a lot of clarity, but I would encourage you, because the labels come and go, right? The labels are, the word sociopath is no longer in the DSM. So it doesn't mean that sociopaths don't exist. It just means that it's been renamed. So when the words are pointers to behaviors. And so the behaviors are what are problematic. And it's really important that we realize, okay, kind of knowing ourselves well enough to know what is toxic behavior for us. Because everybody has their own line in the sand. And not even just toxic, but maybe even just acceptable, right? So knowing yourself well enough to be like, maybe this person, maybe they are a narcissist, or maybe somebody isn't even close to being a narcissist, but they have some behaviors that you're just not okay with. Like, it's okay. It's okay to have a standard for what you want in your life as far as other people go. Like, that's totally fine. I think that comes as a news flash for a lot of us, because a lot of us, I think, tend to be like, well, but we should just love and accept everybody unconditionally and have no boundaries. And so we don't want to judge. We want all these people in our life, and we just need to love them. And, but that, like, there's a lot of caveats there, right? So it's important that we are choosy with who we let into our life. That doesn't mean that we have to be mean to people that we don't want in our life, but it's okay if you're a recovering alcoholic, it's okay to be like, you know what? I don't want to hang out with people that drink. Doesn't make the people that drink bad, doesn't make them a narcissist. It just means that you don't want to hang out with drinkers. That's fine. That's your prerogative, right? So, but let me back up to the terms narcissist and borderline and these things. So where I see a lot of people get tripped up is when that fog of cognitive dissonance starts settling back in, because it does. It lifts and then it settles again. And this is just kind of a cycle until enough time has gone on that a person sees a situation clearly, and then the fog is fully lifted and they see it eyes wide open, and then they're good. But they often get caught up in the minutia, and they're like, well, but are they really a narcissist? And they might even go so far as to talk to a therapist or somebody else, and then maybe even the therapist says, well, I don't, that doesn't sound like a narcissist to me, or maybe they're not a narcissist. And so then the person's back to square one, where they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess, because in their brain, because the cognitive dissonance is set in their brain, they're telling themselves, well, if that person's not a narcissist, then I guess they can be fixed. So I guess I'll stick around and just tolerate this and hope that they eventually change. So that's the power of a label. And so it's really, really important that, first of all, you don't ever turn your power and control over to anybody else ever again. And realizing, so if you're talking to a therapist and the therapist says, well, this is what they're thinking, that this person, doesn't have a personality disorder, that they're not a narcissist or what have you, to realize, first of all, that this personality disorders can be very subjective, because the clinician is making an assessment based on what they're seeing at that moment in this meeting, right? In this meeting time with them. So, or in this session. So A master manipulator is generally going to be on their best behavior, and they can snow a clinician. They can snow an even a really skilled clinician. So this is why I would encourage people to, look at the behavior that the label points to, and then if you're on the fence and you're not sure of whether you should stay or go, to get clear with yourself. What is problematic behavior for you? And how much time and money are you willing to throw at this in hopes that they're going to change? That'll give you the answers that you need right there, right? So getting crystal clear on that. And then also having an idea of what kind of changes do you need to see happen over what period of time? Because change is not easy for any of us. And that's even when we really want to change. Change is not easy. So those are just some things that's kind of off topic, but just some points I think that are valid to bring up, because again, I see that same question asked in many different ways in the support group all the time. And I get it, because I asked it too, thinking, well, if maybe Jack was only a sex addict, and I guess if he was a sex addict, well, there's groups for that, right? He could change, and I'll stick around because there's obviously something wrong with him. So I'll just stick around, and but then it was no, this is so much more than that. And even still, he has no desire to change, no sincere desire to change. And even if change is possible, even if a person's highly motivated to change, look at different disorders, look at alcoholism or look at anorexia, right? There's two very different disorders out there that there are treatments for them. They're very successful treatments for them, right? And yet still, even though there are anorexics and alcoholics out there that really want to change, that have been in treatment on and off for years, and they still are not changed. They're still anorexic, they're still alcoholics. So just because a treatment, there is one, right, that does help a lot of people that go into it, the person has to really be at that point where they're ready, willing, and able to make that change. So even if somebody were to come on the news tomorrow and be like, there is a cure for narcissistic personality disorder, or there is a cure for antisocial personality disorder, that in itself does not mean anything. It really doesn't. That's interesting, but it's more so is the person, the antisocial or the narcissist, the sociopath or the narcissist, are they ready, willing, and able to change? Will they actually work the program? And that's what makes narcissism and sociopathy, sociopaths, so darn tricky. And it's such a tricky thing to treat with people, is because they lack insight into knowing themselves, knowing that they have a problem. That's why they don't get better. It's not that they have the label of narcissist or antisocial. It's because they don't see any problem with their behavior. And we're not motivated to change if we never suffer consequences of what we're doing, right? So, just my little mini rant, off topic. All right, let me see. Cecilia says, well, what do you mean? I don't have a personality disorder. I'm amazing. Yes, and that's how a lot of them are. So, let's see. Hey, Randy's here. Hi, Randy. Let's see. Violet, I only caught the tail end of this, but she was saying, it's very likely you may have complex post-traumatic stress disorder. She's talking to another gal. She said, because I thought I was borderline when I was younger, and then I realized it was just trauma. And so kind of my 2 cents on that is, I think a lot of times borderline personality disorder is misdiagnosed as, I think it's misdiagnosed in general. Just from what I have seen, the vast majority of patients that I've worked with that have been diagnosed as borderline, I would say it's complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's misdiagnosed. And they have a lot of borderline tendencies, right? They tend to have poor emotional regulation. They tend to very quickly, they're very self-injurious. So it's a lot of threats of suicide. It's cutting. It's, yeah, like it's sort of like, I'll show you, look at what I'm going to do to myself, kind of a thing. And again, it's kind of just poor emotional regulation. So they get upset really quickly. They cry very easily. They throw a fit if they don't get their way. Like they just don't have the emotional regulation that normal adults do. But there is a therapy out there, and I've seen it work really well for many people that have been diagnosed as borderline personality disorder. It's called dialectical behavioral therapy. It's DBT for short. It's mindfulness therapy. It's basically Buddhism. It's like this Western spin on a lot of Buddhist concepts. And it really does help with, I think it's something that should be taught in high school, frankly, because it's really great for emotional control. So for those, again, people, but they have to really want to work it. They have to want to change. What I have seen, I'll be curious to see what Randy has to say to this too, is so that go for, again, just speaking off the cuff, like probably I would say 50 to 75% of people that I've worked with that have been diagnosed as borderline, it's been more complex PTSD, especially if you're reading their file and you're like, yeah, I get it. And then you see stuff in your own life when you go through stuff and you're like, I wonder if I'm borderline. Like I have a poor sense of self. I have kind of this fragmented identity. I am, highly emotional. I'm very unpredictable. And I think about suicide all the time. Right. But so then it's just unprocessed trauma for a lot of people. The other 25% or so of borderline patients that I have seen over the years, I would say they're more like they are emotional manipulators. Because to me, and I know that I might be alone in this, those 50% or 75% that it's more of that complex post-traumatic stress disorder kind of stuff. They really, I mean, they can be a little gamey. I'm not gonna lie. They want what they want. But they're not, and they can be very triangulating and they can be very pot stirring, but you can tell it's to kind of get some basic needs met. Which I guess that's kind of what drives us all, really. But there's a lot of them that I think it's more of like narcissism. There's that 25% where it's I wouldn't say that borderline is their primary issue. It's how they manipulate is through kind of borderline type tendencies, but it's more of just this high degree of selfishness, a lack of empathy, a lack of remorse. Again, a lot of the people that I have met, patients that have, borderline personality disordered patients, they have empathy, they have remorse. A lot of them tend to be some of the nicest people you'll ever meet, and they give and they give and they give. And so I don't know. That to me it's an interesting disorder. Obviously by no stretch an authority on any of this. I'm just a woman with a microphone and some free time and an opinion. So, I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting how it all goes down. I would encourage you, if you've ever gone through an abusive relationship of any kind, to definitely get that PTSD kind of stuff resolved, because there is a lot of unresolved trauma. I think a lot of us have a lot of unresolved trauma, and it's worth examining, and it's worth working through, and finding a good therapist or kind of life coach or whoever that is skilled in understanding complex post-traumatic stress disorder, because it's really not a very common thing as far as diagnoses go. So finding a clinician that's highly skilled in that might take some doing, but I think it's worth the research and worth getting to the bottom of it. So let me scroll scroll down. Elise is here. Randy is saying, she says, I stay clear of borderline personality disordered people. They are dangerous. Interesting. Yeah. And maybe it's just, again, like my experience is just kind of a snapshot of it. Mine has been that they're dangerous to themselves and kind of just, come across as really dramatic to other people. But, I don't know. I heard I think I mentioned this last time. I heard a great saying from this guy who's a psychologist and he has a blog. I forget his name right now, but he had said, he's talking about kind of how you can tell if you're dealing with a cluster B person. So there's different, and I think they might have even gotten away from this, but there at one point there was different personality disorder clusters. And so cluster B, you had borderline, you had narcissist, you had antisocial, and you had histrionic. And the defining characteristics of these cluster B personality disorders were that they were all defined as being dramatic, erratic, or emotional. And that was the defining features for them. And he had said, basically, if you're at a picnic in the park and if you assuming that you know the people that you're having this picnic with, if you see somebody walking towards you and you have that feeling of, oh, brother, like that's how you can kind of spot a cluster B kind of person, where they're just triangulating, pot stirring, dramatic. They're dramatic, they're erratic, and they're emotional. And I thought that was kind of a good way to look at it. So let's scroll up. So let's see. Martine says, oh gosh, half of my face was suddenly paralyzed. I had to rush to the hospital. Turned out to be something called Bell's palsy, but they don't know what caused it. How scary. Are you, is your face still half paralyzed? Or are you back to normal? Elise, yes, that's a great example. Elise says, Judge Judy and those shows are filled with cluster Bs. Yep. Yes, they are. I would also say that our prison system is by and large filled with cluster Bs. I don't think that a lot of society fully understands like the impact of unresolved trauma. I mean, it's probably like not only do I personally think it's an epidemic, I think it is a national crisis. And it's, you've got the prisons full of antisocials and narcissists, and you've got a lot of the white collar crime. I mean, it's ego run amok, underdeveloped ego run amok. And it costs people it costs taxpayers probably trillions of dollars. I mean, it's just the cost is astronomical. Court fees and housing them and trying to treat them, and they're reoffending, and all of it that goes along. Okay. Peanuts Girl says, scroll up some more, Dana. I have a question, and I finally have the chance to ask. Okay, I will. Overcoming understanding is going to bed. Good night, my dear. It was good chatting with you. I think you're so responsible going to bed so early. That's what I need to be. So let's see. Let's see. Annie had said, oh, internet, please stop being so slow. I am missing important stuff. Oh, I hope that's your internet and not mine. If it is your internet, then just know that this live stream will be like you can download it or watch it again or whatever, within like I think an hour or so after it's done. So let's see. Okay, scrolling up. I don't see your question, so if you don't mind asking it again, that would be great. Okay, True Love says, I had a small relapse because I took up that bad boy's offer to hook up. Happened the other night, and now I'm battling withdrawal all over again. So, here's the thing with like reopening contact and doing things like that. You're human, okay? You're human, and you had very real feelings for this man, and so it takes a while to detox from these relationships and from this person and in all of this. And so, try not to be too hard on yourself, because I think sometimes reopening contact, and of course, I don't ever advise this, but I think sometimes it can be exactly what needs to happen, because it does cause all that pain. So, all of that pain that you're in right now, I would try to embrace it and be like, this hurts so bad because it's a reminder that I have to stay away. The pain is your friend. It's not your enemy. It's not something to try to resist. It's not something to try to fight. Embrace it and realize it's the reminder of trying to keep you safe, and it's the healthy side of you that knows that you deserve more. So I mean, I know maybe it sounds weird, but I would celebrate it and thank it for being there, because it's like we were talking about before. It's so it can be so difficult. It can be so difficult to move on, especially if you've been in a situation like this for any length of time, where pain has become your new normal, right? Like being let down, being lied to and manipulated and cheated on and stolen from and emotionally abused and called names and all of this. If that becomes the new normal, it's really hard to break free of that, right? Because it's like, well, if they do something else bad, it's not the shock that it once was. And so it's good that you're experiencing pain, because that means that you're getting healthy. It means that you're healing from this. I know that's kind of a backwards, inside out, upside down way to look at it, but it's true. So it's the reminder that you need something better in your life. She says, I was married for 16 years. I'm finally gaining the strength that I need. I want to know if you have any advice for a highly sensitive person. I think, hold on, let me take a drink here. My advice for a highly sensitive person would be, because I think a lot of us are highly sensitive, and not necessarily, I mean, that kind of often tends to go hand in hand with codependency, but I think highly sensitive people can also exist on their, without being codependent. And there's a lot of really amazing qualities that are in being highly sensitive, in being an empath. Your true power, and it's such a gift, like those qualities really are such a gift. Your true power rests in you having healthy boundaries, and that just comes from getting to know yourself and to realize the gifts that you do have. So I guess my advice to you would be to try to reconnect as much as possible to yourself and getting in tune, because once you really get in tune with that, with your gifts, with how you feel and understanding other people, you really, really tap into that in the context of healthy boundaries and standards. That's when you really shine, because then you're going to be living your life full out. That's when like your amazingness really comes to light. So what do I mean? What do I mean by getting to know like your feelings, getting to know yourself? So because many highly sensitive people are, for the longest time, they have been so focused on other people and meeting other people's needs, right? And they're really sensitive to energy, which is so interesting that we get caught up with such toxic people when here we are, we really value authenticity and we really value good vibes, right? And here we are with the exact opposite of that. And so it can be so strange. Like, how on earth did this happen? Because we really value the exact opposite. And of course, the answer is emotional manipulators just mirror us back, right? For the longest time. And so all of our good qualities, they're oftentimes pretending to have those, or they're exploiting them. So if they're not pretending to have them, then they're exploiting them. They're exploiting compassion and generosity and kindness and all of these things. So realizing how you feel, like that's where I would start. And so I've talked about this before, but going through and asking, just reconnecting with yourself, getting clear on how do you feel about certain things. So going through your house with things that you're not emotionally invested in. I think this is a very good way to start this. Asking yourself on a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being ice cold, 10 being like you are juiced. Like that is totally yes. Like that is yes, 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 yes. I love that. Asking yourself certain things like, how do I feel about these pillows? Like on a scale of 0 to 10, right? Like for me, I really like these. I would say these are like a 9. This is not an exact science. So like, your number system might kind of ebb and flow based on, your mood or your hormones or what have you. But just to reconnect and get a sense of what you're feeling. Right. So again, like walking around the house. Okay. So how do you feel about this little, this thing here? Well, for me, this is a 10. And okay, how do I feel with the lighting in a certain room? So going through your different senses, right? How do I feel about the way that this meal tastes? So sight and touch and taste and all of your different senses. And I would encourage you too to expand that onto like your sixth sense. And that can be a really fun exercise of like putting judgment aside, because it's our logical mind wants to judge a situation. How do you feel? How do you feel? How do you feel about, and you can, this would be a fun thing to do with going to like an outdoor cafe or someplace where you could people watch and just paying attention to how do you feel around certain people. Because the more you hone these skills, the better they will get. And then once you get it, once you click into this is how I really feel and this is why, right? So that's kind of the second part of this is once you're starting to identify, okay, well, I like these pillows. These are about a 9. Then to start, and so do this first. Just spend a week or so walking around. Don't ask yourself why. Just spend time asking yourself, how do I feel? A scale of 0 to 10. Get clear on that. Then go back and ask yourself, okay, now why? Why? And then try to get clarity. So for me, these pillows are a 9. I love the color. I love the size of them. I love the material that they're made out of. And I like how they go in my living room. That's why, right? Or if you don't like something, so for example, at work, I have these awful fluorescent lights overhead. I turn my lights off. I have like everybody, it's so funny. Everybody comes in my office and they're like, oh, it is so nice in here. Cause I have like 3 or 4 different lamps on. I have this big picture of this ocean scene with a hammock, and I have a candle warmer. So it always smells good in there. And I have plants, like it's this whole setup. And, but because once you start realizing, like, okay, I don't like this, these fluorescent lights make me feel anxious. They make me feel, and you just start getting more in tune with yourself. And so here's the thing: once you become more in tune with yourself, it's so much easier to have boundaries because you're going to know how you feel. So when you know about how you feel with things that are fairly inconsequential, like couch pillows, right? Then it's going to be a lot easier when you're in a bigger deal, when you're in a bigger situation that you do have emotional investment in, like friends, like family, like a significant other. To realize, to be able to pinpoint, you know what? I feel tense. I feel tense around this person. This situation right now is like a 5 out of 10 for me. And then you can start asking, okay, this is how you feel. Why? And then thinking like, I wonder if it's because, they've had 4 drinks tonight, and that reminds me a lot of my ex-husband, who was an alcoholic. Because it might not have anything to necessarily do with them. It might be something that they're doing that's a trigger for you, but you're not even aware. Or maybe it's, you know what? I'm tense. The situation's making me uncomfortable because he made a really devaluing statement about his daughter, and that just wasn't cool. Like, that just didn't sit well with me. So the more clarity you get, the easier it's going to be to have boundaries, because you're going to know when you feel bad and you're going to know when you feel good, and you're going to want to spend more time feeling good. The more often that you can spend time in that zone of feeling good, the more you're going to want to stay there. So it doesn't have to be this whole uphill process of, oh, I've got to figure everything out in my life and rehash like my childhood and get to the bottom of all this. Focus on getting clear on how you feel about things, and then moving in the direction of what feels good. And the rest will take care of itself. The goodness in your life will crowd out the noise, and you're going to see the noise for what it is. And it's the craziest thing. It's so interesting and just so empowering and so cool, especially if you are a highly sensitive person, because I think you'll be able to really tune in and turn on and tap into those gifts quickly. And I think you're going to see fast results, like really fast results, situations that you maybe never even thought were problematic. Again, like it might have been the lighting in your office, or the lighting in your bedroom, or the smell of an air freshener, or certain things that you find either really enjoyable or really not enjoyable. And like, you kind of just, once you identify that sandpaper, that stuff that's in your life, that sandpaper things, and you start getting rid of them, you're just going to be like, oh I cannot believe I lived like that for as long as I did. I hate the way that light is like in my bathroom or whatever, or I hate the smell of that. Why on earth did I have that candle? Or those sheets are not comfortable at all. Like, from here on out, I am never buying 200 thread count sheets again. Seriously, I mean, I joke, but that was actually a big aha moment for me probably about 10 years ago. It had never dawned on me, to spend money on, it felt very extravagant to buy a high thread count sheet, but like, then you pay attention, you're like, okay, this is what I like. Like, this is how I'm going to prioritize. And then again, like, once you kind of identify what are those peak experiences for you? What are those 9s and 10s? Who are those 9s and 10s in your life? You start spending more time in that element. You're not going to want to go back at all. And when you do go back, it's going to feel like you're hopping in hot water, and it's not going to be comfortable. So again, that was kind of a long-winded explanation, but that would be what I would encourage you to do, is to really take some time, get in touch with yourself, get figuring out those 9s and 10s, and what are the 5. Here's the thing. It can be, if we've been in an unhealthy situation for a really long time, we might be very used to our normal might be a life of 2s and 3s, right? But we might not realize that it's a 2 and a 3. the more you start gravitating towards those nines or tens, the more the bottom of your scale is going to move up, and it's going to become very clear as to what really is a zero or a one or a two or a three, and what really is a five or a six, and what really is a nine or a 10. If that makes sense. So your scale is going to keep continually be adjusting and growing and changing as you do. So let me scroll down. Peanuts Girl says, he knows all he has to do is raise his voice and I crumble. I don't know how to not crumble and let him see he's not getting to me. So it's a little bit like what we talked about earlier, right? With anticipating. So if you're thinking about interacting with an emotional manipulator, right? It really helps to anticipate what are they going to do. So in your situation, you know, he yells. And when he yells, he says things, or maybe he says things in a certain way that make me feel terrible. They make me feel 2 inches tall. So knowing that, to not be, try to, and that's easier said than done, and I get it, but try to not be surprised when he does act like that. And then try to have a response, right, planned ahead of time. So if he does say something hurtful, right, that you're not so caught off guard, because it's like, well, yes, of course of course he yelled and screamed, and of course he said this hurtful thing, because that's what he does. He yells and he screams and he says hurtful things. Like, I'm going to quit being surprised by this because that's what he does. And so for me to expect him to act any different, that's where the crazy making comes from, right? So to realize, yes, this is what he does. And so now I'm going to, when he does start yelling and screaming, I'm going to practice having the response of saying something, or walking into the other room, or saying, you know what, I'm not okay with being talked to like that. Or if you're on the phone with him, hanging up, right? Like, you don't need to talk. You don't need to take that. Like, you don't need to listen to it. He will learn very quickly. If and again, like, if you hang up on him, he'll learn very quickly. Like, this is not going to work if you just keep hanging up on him. But again, any and all advice and feedback I ever give, this is you know your situation best. And because narcissists and sociopaths, they can be highly unpredictable people. Whatever strategy you employ, make sure that it's always, whatever you do, it's keeping you safe and sane. So if you think that, telling him I'm not going to be talked to like this is going to make him freak out and, attack you, like physically attack you, then by all means don't do that. But if if you can set a boundary and if he's just going to yell and scream and throw a fit, then to try to keep your boundaries as much as you possibly can, and realize his behavior is not a reflection of you. It has nothing to do with you. Like, you are his emotional punching bag. Healthy people don't go around needing to tear down other people. They don't. Ever. Ever, ever. So his behavior is a reflection of him and how he feels about himself. It has nothing to do with you. These are his insecurities. These are his issues that are coming to the surface, and he's dumping them all onto you. It's what they do. So people are talking about cha-cha-cha. Practical Dreamer is mentioning... meeting person. Do you find the spark is instant upon meeting somebody or more of a slow burn? And I missed the beginning question of that. Okay, I love that. Traveling Wolf says, and I've only caught part of this conversation. What I have found, to my surprise and my relief, is that the spark is even better with healthy people. There's no need to live dangerously anymore. I would agree completely. People ask that. I felt this, wondered this too, where it's sort of like, am I only attracted to narcissists? Like, why am I so attracted to these emotional manipulators and the love bombing, right? Because that's really what it is. It's not the rest of it. It's the love bombing is what I was getting roped in with. And I think what a lot of people get roped in with. And people confuse that with this amazing chemistry right away, but really they're just telling you everything that you want to hear. And it's not chemistry, it's somebody telling you everything you want to hear, right? Which always feels good. So but it's not, because it's not healthy, it's not sincere. Healthy people, a friend of mine, after my relationship with Jack, had made a comment. I'm trying to think of how she phrased it because it was phenomenal. I I had made the comment that that I loved him so much, and she had said something like, "I know that you loved him, but think about how intensely you'll love somebody when it's real." And that it's so true. It's so true. Having a relationship with real depth, with that you can trust somebody, and there's not that walking on eggshells. There's not this, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality lurking there. There's not any of that. It's so, it's just so wonderful because you can just relax. Like, you can relax and be yourself, and you don't have to worry about that Mr. Hyde personality coming out and causing, drama and dysfunction and chaos and hurt and heartache. You just have a normal, even keel relationship that's built on a solid foundation of, honesty and trust and respect and dignity and all of these things. It's not built on them creating this whirlwind situation and this emotional roller coaster of the good times are really good and the bad times are really bad, and they're love bombing, and when they're sorry, and then they're cheating and manipulating and stealing and lying when they're not, and you're off the crazy train. Like, you're off of it, and it's really nice to be off of it, because you can't have a relationship with somebody that is, that's not honest. That's not honest with themselves. If there's no trust, there's no relationship. So let's see. Badger Botherer, Badger Botherer number 1 says, are most narcissists really male? Statistically speaking, yes. However, comma, I think that is just because that's really what's reported. And my guess is that it's probably closer to 50-50. And I think the reason the stats are so skewed with men being the problem is because, how a lot of this data is collected has to do with different types of surveys done by different types of clinicians and jails. And, more men you could have a woman and a man convicted of the same crime, and statistically speaking, the guy is going to serve jail time, or at least more jail time than the woman would. So there's a lot of like subconscious, like, social stigma and concepts of, again, who can be abusive, who can be problematic, and who can't. And so societal wise, there's this idea that men are that men are the abusers and that females are the victims. But if you ask a lesbian, or if you ask a guy who's had a female partner, they'll tell you, like, no, women can be just as violent as a guy, and if not worse. Margaret Mead, the famous, what was she, anthropologist, had said one time that she believed that women should not be allowed in the military because they were too violent. And I thought that was really interesting, because she just studied women and was like, and ladies, like, I speak the truth with this. Like, a guy, if he has an issue, he'll get in a fight and then it's done. Women will go, I mean, vicious, and they will seek to just mess a person up. I mean, they will go after your job, your friends. They're vindictive is the word with abusive women. Whereas, men tend to be violent, women tend to be very vindictive and violent. So it's so anyways, and that's kind of debatable too. I think men can be just, they can be both be very damaging. I just thought that was an interesting point to bring up. I'm not trying to say that men are somehow less abusive. It's just you get what I'm saying. So here's the other thing. So statistically, women, if they have an issue with their relationship, when people tend to seek therapy, they don't tend to seek therapy because they really want personal growth, right? People tend to seek out a therapist because they're in intense amounts of pain and they need an answer. And so, generally speaking, this is just my guess, I would say that the vast majority of the time when a person is dragging their spouse into couples counseling, it's because of infidelity. And most women that's going to be their solution. They're going to drag their spouse into counseling because he was cheating, right? Whereas I don't think a lot of men are necessarily going to go that route, or at least if they do, it's a very much a diminished percentage of men that would do that. So I think that's where a lot of the numbers are skewed, just because of how people tend, like who seeks treatment, right? Who tends to seek treatment, who tends to insist upon treatment, these kinds of things. I think because that's how men are more identified as being narcissistic, because it's can be spotted more in therapy or in jail. But the true number, I think it's very, very off. I think at a minimum, it's really underreported. So I think estimates are anywhere from like 1% to 3% of the population has a narcissistic personality disorder. And I want to say the estimates are about the same for antisocial personality disorder. But combined, because really the problem with antisocials, it's the narcissism like in the shell of the antisocial personality disorder. So it's all of those traits of narcissism, this blinding degree of selfishness, this huge level of entitlement, the lack of empathy, the lack of remorse. It's all of that. And then they also exploit other people on a regular basis. But I would say it's probably close to 10% of the population if you add up all the different cluster B disorders that are running around out there. It's a lot. So numbers are not accurate, in my opinion. Let's see. Truth Seeker was saying men gossip as much as women, I think. Not hating, I dislike the false gender stereotypes out there, including the ones that doesn't let men be sensitive. I really hate that one too. I agree completely. I agree completely. And I try to not, even though I was just bringing up a bunch of gender stereotypes, that's just a broad brush. I agree that there's a lot of men out there. What I have seen in the support groups, and it's not necessarily it's because it's a gender stereotype. I think it's more of the information that's presented out there as far as like what abuse looks like. Because if you think about it, for women, many women often have a hard time understanding that or realizing that they're in an abusive relationship, even if they're getting beat up physically. Like they still have a hard time understanding or realizing that they're in an abusive relationship. And I think a lot of this has to do with there's not a lot of information or widespread information out there as far as what an abusive relationship really looks like. And the information that is out there is very much, very visible bruises. And it shows it, even though it shows the imagery of a female victim and a male abuser. And so a lot of people think like, well, it's only problematic. It's only domestic violence if he is hitting her in the face repeatedly and leaving black and blue marks everywhere. But it's somehow not abuse if the woman is hitting him. Maybe he deserved it, right? That's the thinking for a lot of people. Or if there's pinching, kicking, hitting, or not hitting, pinching, kicking, biting, scratching, pushing, shoving, these kinds of things are not identified as physical abuse by a lot of people, even though they are. And that's physical abuse. I mean, you would think that would be, much easier to identify, but it's not, because it's not the imagery that's floating around out there. So, verbal abuse, and verbal abuse, emotional abuse, again, that kind of stuff isn't really talked about either. But when it is talked about, it's talked about in extremes. And so people tend to think, well, it's not emotional abuse unless it's this constant, chronic put downs, right? Derogatory, like hands down, that is awful, awful behavior. It's on a regular basis. People don't identify it. So with a lot of men that are targets of abuse, they oftentimes have a hard time identifying that they're in an abusive relationship. And they might even talk to a lot of their guy friends about it. And their guy friends might, and again, we've heard this in the support group, where their guy friends might joke for years and be like, oh, well, women are difficult, or she's that way because she's hormonal, or, and they're minimizing and justifying all of this really bad behavior, even though the guy might have black eyes, or even with police or attorneys or, other people that are there to help. In their mind, they're thinking, he's 6'5" and she's 5'1". So how on earth are they in a domestic violence relationship? Because it's this idea that abuse, physical abuse, only happens because you've got one person that's bigger than the other, but that's not the case. The trickiest part with physical abuse is it's what precedes that, which is all of the emotional abuse. And it's all of the threats, and it's the intimidation, and it's the grinding down of self-esteem. And it's all of these components that keep people stuck, regardless of gender. But for men, I think they have the added challenge of, there's not a lot of support. And so if they do reach out for help, it's minimized, or other people just don't understand that, they don't associate that with being abuse. Or I think, and again, men have this too, women have this too, where it's this idea of, there's a lot of shame and guilt and regret and remorse with being in an abusive relationship. People always want to know, like, how does that happen? Why did you stay? Right? That's the common question. Why did you stay? And they might, odds are, because of that fog of cognitive dissonance that we've been talking about all night, they don't know. And they might say, I don't know. Like, I loved her, or I loved him, or I thought he would change, or this is what we did. Like, you get married and then you work through everything, right? And so there's a lot of different reasons people stay, or they didn't have the money to leave, or they were terrified to share custody with this other person. I think a lot of men go through that, where it's like they know that their wife, or their soon-to-be ex-wife, is an absolute monster, and they're terrified because they know women are, on average, especially women that are highly emotionally manipulative, and they're tiny and they're cute and they're, believable, right? They're the believable victim, that the courts are going to side with them, that they're going to get full custody, and the men don't have a chance, and now they can't be there to protect their children. So there's so many different factors at play, and just interesting stuff. It's interesting and horrible, and there's a lot of misinformation and re-education that needs to go on out there. So again, that was another long-winded thing. I'm sorry. I'm on a roll tonight. I've had a lot of coffee today. Let's see. Mandy asks, Dana, can you speak about a narcissist's view of marriage? Sure. So, okay, Mandy, when you're dealing with a person, okay, who is selfish, who is entitled, who lacks empathy, who lacks remorse, right? And feels justified in every single thing that they do. They lack accountability and they see nothing wrong with their actions. And because of that, that's like this perfect storm, right? It's this perfect storm of trouble, is what it is. So their view of marriage is whatever suits them. Because when a person has these bends in their personality, right? When they don't care about anything but them, and it's all about them, and there's this total disregard for their actions on other people, right? And there's total lack of accountability. They might give this lip service, right? I really believe marriage. I believe in monogamy. I believe in a covenant between two people, and I want to be with you. And they can do a really great job at talking the talk. But the reality is, if you're really with a narcissist, if you're with a person, again, blinding degree of selfishness, jaw-dropping lack of empathy, they have these characteristics, they have no view on marriage. They don't have morals and values, because it's not about, they don't think of the world in terms of like what's kind of like what's good or bad. It's always in, well, what works for me? What works best for me? How can I spin this to make this work best for me? So not all narcissists cheat, but the reason that narcissists stay faithful, or don't cheat, I should say, isn't because out of some sort of like high moral ground. There's some other reason that's benefiting them. Either they have a low sex drive, or they don't want to risk public exposure, or they need to protect their status or their social status or their public image. There's other reasons. It's not because they feel that they somehow owe something to another person, because they don't. It's all about them all the time, and they justify everything they do. So they could say, and there is a very big, disconnect there between their words and their actions. And it's because they justify things. So if you think about, like, if you didn't have any concept, if your concept of right and wrong and morality was fluid, and it was just dependent upon how you felt at the time, because that's what it is for them, then you can justify anything. I mean, if you talk to a little child, right? Like they are little narcissists. I mean, and it's a state of like ego development, and most kids grow out of it. But if you listen to a little kid justify their bad behavior, like there is no sincere accountability there for like a lot of little kids, right? They will kick their brother and then tell you why they feel justified in doing that. They will, they will eat all the cookies and tell you why they had to go do that, and they'll blame you. Like, they're crafty, and it's never their fault. And the excuses they come up with it's hilarious and laughable sometimes when it's a little kid. It's not so hilarious and laughable when it's, a 35-year-old man. So, what they say their views are, and their actions and their words don't line up. And so that's why it's so important that you look at their actions, because anybody can talk a good game, right? Like, we could all profess to have these high morals and values, but if we're out doing the exact opposite, then what we're saying is just talk, and talk isn't just cheap, it's free. So that's my 2 cents on marriage. I actually had a gal, I get this question a lot. Before I get it, Martine says, according to Sam Vaknin, the narcissist often have one island of stability. So the marriage is like a safe haven where they do not rock the boat like all the other areas in their lives. I totally disagree with that. I mean, just that might be true for him, but at the same time, he's married. So maybe there's kind of that secondary gain with him saying something like that. But you look at the different support groups, right? So experience would say that that's not the case, because the vast majority of people that are probably finding my site, probably even finding Sam's site, they have been cheated on pathologically by their spouse, or their former spouse. So no, narcissists tend to be very instant gratification kind of people, which again is this perfect storm for infidelity, because it's instant gratification. So, yeah. What was I going to say? I was going to say something about, shoot. What was I going to say? Oh, people. I get questions a lot on a weekly basis about, people saying, basic something along the lines of, do you think that therapy will help my narcissistic fiance, or do you, something along those lines. Like I'm in love with this man, but I think he's a narcissist. He's got this pattern of lying and cheating and manipulating and all kinds of things. But we want to get married next fall, and in wanting my 2 cents on that. And, my 2 cents on this, the whole purpose of dating is it's a screening process, right? It's like you're hiring for the most important position in your life, which is of life partner. This is the person you're going to be running a 3-legged race through life with. And it's a big deal. It's a big deal. And everything in life is easy to get into. It's easy to buy a house. It's easy to buy a car. It's easy to get married. These things are easy. They're much harder to get out of. So it's important that we move slow when we're doing this. And you want to make a very well-informed decision. Getting married just because you love a person is a terrible reason to get married, frankly. It's also, it's a terrible reason to get married. So it's nice, it's important that you love the person, but there's other things that need to go into play. Right? What are their morals and values? How are they with your family? How are you with their family? How is your life going to be? Do they want to have kids? Do you want to have kids? How are they with money? Do they have any unresolved, debt? Do they have any unresolved addictions? What are you getting yourself into if you marry this person? And so a lot of people, and I get it because I've been there too, where it's this idea of, because that love triggers that fog of cognitive dissonance, and it's just part of it, where we see this other person through these rose-colored glasses, where it's sort of like, well, yeah, I get, they lie and they cheat and they steal and they manipulate and they do all these things, but I love them. I feel so good when we have such a great time together, and we both love comedies, and we love organic cooking. These things in common, but the core stuff, because those feelings of love, they ebb and they flow, right? Those core personality traits, that's what you're marrying. That is what's going to be raising your children. And so you can't separate the personality from the person. It's a total package. So it's really important that you love the personality, not just bits and pieces of the personality. And it's important too to ask yourself, ahead of time, before that fog of cognitive dissonance sets in, what are your deal breaker behaviors for somebody else? Where is your line in the sand? It's important that we all have this, because trying to figure out a line in the sand when we're in the thick of things is really hard. And this is why people tend to stay stuck. They stay in this holding, they get married. I see this all the time. I've had friends, I didn't stay in it as long as a lot of people, but a lot of people, they tend to get married, I think, by default at about 20, in their late 20s. It's kind of this feeling of, oh, I better hurry up and do something here if I'm going to get married. Everybody else is getting married. If I'm going to have kids, I maybe kind of need to start thinking about this. They get married. They're like, well, this person's, great. We've been together for long enough. I guess we kind of need to have some forward momentum, right? So they get married, and then they have kids right away. And then they start realizing, you know what? I knew there was a reason we had been dating for 5 years and there wasn't forward momentum. And it was because, there wasn't enough in common, or it wasn't a good match. And so now that they have kids, they feel stuck, and they're like, you know what? Now we've got to make things work, and they stay in it for another 5 or 10 years, and it's this fizzle out of like, okay, we're not compatible, and now we're trying to get out of this, and then they finally jump ship, and then they divorce, and now they're in their early 40s. And a lot of this could have been prevented, right? Had they known themselves better, and of course, again, like, none of this is taught, right? And for me, I mean, I'm 38, and this is all like, hindsight is 2020, right? So it's having those ideas of what deal breaker behavior is. So if deal breaker behavior is, you're like, I'm not gonna be dating somebody who's who's been in and out of jail. I'm not gonna date somebody that's got a drug problem. I'm not gonna date somebody that does drugs. I'm not going to date somebody who, XYZ, fill in the blank, like whatever it is for you. And again, you don't have to justify this. Like, this is your criteria, and it's okay your criteria is your criteria. It's not negotiable, and you don't have to defend it. Everybody's got their stuff that they want and don't want in a partner. So, it's the purpose of dating is to figure out if this person's going to be a good lifelong partner for you or not, right? Some people just like to date and date and date and date. They have no intention of getting married or having some sort of like lifelong companion. That's fine too. Know yourself well enough to know, this is what I'm doing. I don't have any intention of getting married. I want to be a bachelor or a bachelorette my whole life. That's fine. Be honest with the person that you're dating. So they're not holding out hope thinking, we've been together for 8 years, and every single Valentine's Day and Christmas and New Year's Eve and birthday, they keep hoping and praying that they're going to get a ring. And in your mind, you're thinking like, well, I don't want to get married. So it's important that obviously that you're honest with the other person, but knowing yourself well enough to know what you want, and, what you want and when to walk away, instead of trying to make things work. If you're engaged to somebody and you're in therapy and you're trying to make this work, and you're thinking that they're a narcissist and they've got all these problematic behaviors, again, set an idea of how much time and money are you going to throw at this, and what kind of results do you need to see before you walk away. But it's okay to walk away. Just because you've been with somebody, you're engaged, you've been with somebody for 5 years or whatever, and I think a lot of people, they're like, well, we've already been together for 5 years, we're engaged, I really want to make this work because we've already been together for 5 years. Don't throw good time after bad. Like, if you've made a mistake, you've made a mistake. Get real with yourself, cut bait, and drive on. But trying to, taking a porcupine to therapy and then asking the therapist, being like, can you change this porcupine into a kitten? Because I really wanted a kitten. They're only human. They can only do so much. So, it's, you just got to know what you're looking for. So that's that. Back to the thing about Sam with narcissists liking an island of stability. I wonder, in like those that cheat, what their island of stability would be then, if that's true. Because I could kind of see I see what he's saying. But I think I'm just thinking of different narcissists that I've known. But see, they've all cheated. But they have done a great job at making it seem like they were the world's greatest guy, and family meant everything to them, and marriage meant everything to them. But really, it, like everything else, it meant nothing to them except what they could get out of it, which was, it's all dependent upon their whims at the time. So those narcissists probably would have said that was their island of stability. But and it kind of was, because they had partners that were never ever going to leave them. or that it was going to take a long time for them to actually leave, because it has to get that, you know, we're motivated by two things in this life, right? Like pain or pleasure. And pain is the bigger motivator of the two. And so if we oftentimes don't change unless we experience enough pain. And so a lot of their partners, things are going to have to get incredibly painful in order for them to actually leave. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Interesting. Interesting. I guess that would, then it kind of begs the question of, well, how are you defining stable? Like, because I guess things could be, unstably or unstably stable. If you've got a severe codependent as a partner who's not going to leave no matter what you do, then that's stability in the sense of they're not going anywhere. You've got your home base, you've got a place to lay your head at night. So, let me scroll up and get some more questions here. Okay, let me see, Mandy. Let me get your question. Have any of you witnessed your relationship being played out in front of your eyes with a new supply? Or are they doing everything you begged for with them? So, yes. Makes you feel like, why are they good enough for that and I wasn't? Okay, Mandy, here's the thing. So what you're experiencing, this is all kind of this continuation of the devaluing stage. Even though the relationship's over, even though the discard stage is there, it's this continual kind of being tormented from beyond the grave of the relationship, kind of a devaluing thing going on. So he's doing this intentionally. And so this is just part of the crazy making. It's a continuing emotional abuse is what it is. So let's say, for example, in your relationship, you're like, boy, I really would, let's say he's always talked about losing 50 pounds and having an organic garden and raising alpacas, right? And for 20 years, those things never happened. And then all of a sudden, you guys get divorced, and now all of a sudden, he is living this dream life that he had sold you on with your new partner. He's lost the weight. He's buying alpacas by the baker's dozen, right? He's got this organic garden. He's doing all of these things with this new person. In large part, it's not because he even necessarily wants to do that. It's because he knows it hurts you. And so they'll do this. They'll put all of this all over social media. They'll be telling friends and family, look how happy they are. Look at this new chapter in their life. And it's the life that you wanted to live with them. So let's say, here's maybe a more relatable example than an alpaca farm. Let's say if you wanted to really go to Paris, right? And you guys had talked about going to Paris for decades, and that trip never happened. And all of a sudden he leaves you for somebody else, and now they're taking a vacation to Paris, and they're posting pictures all over Facebook of the Eiffel Tower and this amazing time they're having together. Intentional. That's intentional. It's another jab at. So she says, if they discard you, then why keep hurting you? Don't you mean nothing to them anymore? We never really mean anything to them. So narcissists, there's a term out there called narcissistic supply. And it's basically what we supply narcissists with, because narcissists view the world in terms of supply. They come across an object and they're like, what can I do with this? It's kind of these base needs, right? It's like the feed, breed, fight, flight, like, what do I do with this? What do I do with this object? And they use it for that purpose. So if they steal, they cheat, they lie, they manipulate, they do whatever. So that's one form of supply, right? Like using somebody for transportation or housing or money or sex or social status or public image, or feeding their ego. So it's this whole, If they can make you suffer, then it shows them how important they are. It's very immature and it's very hurtful, right? It's very sadistic because they really get off on causing other people pain. So this is why you have a lot of times narcissists that'll break up with somebody or cause all kinds of chaos and turmoil around holidays or birthdays, or like these kind of high emotional times when they can extract maximum amounts of narcissistic supply from other people, even their children. It's just, it makes them feel very important. And so that's why. Okay, Shania, I'm so sorry. I just saw gosh, she isn't answering any of my questions today. I haven't seen any of your other questions because I've been rambling. So let me scroll up, or if you want to ask another question in the meantime, go for it. So yes, what was your question? Kevin says it's a really hard thing to overcome, the cognitive dissonance of how much they truly don't care about us when we're just supply to them, especially children of narcissistic parents. It is. It's incredibly painful when you just realize. And yes, Shania, the chat is moving fast and I'm talking a lot and I can't keep up with it. So please ask your questions again. I've got my eyes open for them. Okay, one of the questions is, one was that many egotistical, self-centered, materialistic people look like narcs, but they are not manipulative or abusive. So what are they? They are... what are we talking about? Egotistical, self-centered, materialistic people. Well, okay, keep in mind that narcissism, like anything else in life, it is to a degree a healthy personality trait, right? To be kind of very self-oriented. But what we're talking about here is like way past that. So what you're talking about, so you have like, healthy sense of self. My camera's messed. Okay, there we go. Healthy sense of self, right? And then you have, then the spectrum starts, right? So then you have kind of egotistical, you have self-centered, materialistic people that might not be, they're on that spectrum of problematic behavior, right? They might not be full out abusive people, but that alone is still that still qualifies for being narcissistic. If you're self-centered to the point of, you're not taking into account other people and you never think that you have any issues and there's no accountability for your actions, that's still problematic. It's that level. I mean, if a person just there's no insight into that they have an issue, that's problematic. So just because they're not necessarily like verbally or emotionally or physically abusive doesn't mean that they're not problematic, but they're definitely on that spectrum of this is not normal behavior and it's toxic and it's problematic. But I mean, there's, again, so, not all materialistic people are narcissists. And not all narcissists are materialistic. I mean, there's quite a few narcissists out there that aren't materialistic at all. Maybe they value, an advanced degree, or they value, they're kind of more of the covert narcissist. So they find their ego satisfaction and gratification from, working in their church or volunteering or doing these things where it's more about public image. That's how they're getting their ego fed, and not from the latest fashion, right? But egotistical and self-centered to a point of, probably being a problem, like, yeah, that's narcissism. It's just on a spectrum. So so what did I just do with the chat? What on earth did I just do with the chat? How? Okay, I see. I clicked a nope. Yes. Yes. Okay, Melanie says, oh wait. Ah. Okay, Shania says, but can somebody be a narcissist if someone has a massive ego and extremely selfish and self-centered but not manipulative? That's a great question. Yeah, yes. Yes. I don't know if necessarily they're all manipulative, but I think what you would find instead of that manipulative behavior, it would feel like you are in a relationship with a sack of potatoes or a brick wall, because whatever issues, it's always all about them. Like they're just so self-absorbed. They don't care about your day. They don't remember your birthday. They just don't care about you. And so you can maybe have a good time with them. Like you can go to a movie that they want to see. You can go out to dinner at a restaurant they like. And it's this very one sided relationship. They might not be manipulative. It might just be this blinding degree of selfishness that they just can't or won't take anybody else into consideration. Or if they do, it's to like a minuscule amount. But again, because they feel justified for everything, they might not manipulate. I mean, they might be totally on the level with you and say things like, if you were to say something like, well, it's my birthday, I want to pick the restaurant. And they say, you might get an answer something like, well, you know what? Nobody ever let me pick a restaurant when I was a kid or on my birthday. Okay. So, but like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't click. Like things don't click for them. So their mindset is, well, nobody showed me kindness and empathy, so therefore I don't owe anybody else kindness and empathy, even though their partner continually gives them kindness and empathy. In their mind, it's like, well, they didn't get it when they were a kid, so they somehow don't owe it to other people. I mean, I've seen that. I've dated that. So like, it's a slippery slope into being manipulative behavior, but it's not necessarily outright manipulative. It's justification of their selfishness is what it is. Okay, Melanie asks, when a narcissist is with new supply, is it normal for them to not hoover you for a good length of time? Yes, because they're getting they're getting fed from someone else. So somebody asked the other day, and this couch, I swear. Hold on, I got it. My spine. This couch really, okay, it was not, I guess you get what you pay for, but my God. What was I saying? People ask this question a lot about hoovering, and so a hoover in my book is any type of contact from an emotional manipulator that is designed to reopen communication in some way, shape, or form. It might not be an outright hoover. It might not be like, baby, I miss you so much. We were so good together. Me and you versus the world. It might not be like that. It might be something, and it generally isn't like that. It's generally a lot more subtle. So it might be something like, hey, I can't find my favorite hat. Did I leave it over at your place? Or, hey, happy birthday. Or, hey, I just found I have an extra house. I think I have an extra one of your house keys on my keychain. Something like that, where it's so subtle, right? That the former partner is thinking to themselves, or the target is thinking to themselves, yeah, it doesn't hurt. It's harmless. Like if they have a house key of mine, I want that back. Or you know what? They did leave their hat here. I should really get a hold of them. It's not about the hat. It's not about the house key. It's about reopening communication. And so any type of communication with a narcissist, in my opinion, should always be treated as a potential Hoover. And this is, it's always, always, always till the day they die, you need to have an emotional shield up around these people because they do a really great, they know what they want and they can be very convincing. They can do a great job at saying what they need to say in order to get back into a person's life. So, but yeah, it's very common that when after the discard phase, right? So after like you've been dumped, for them generally because they have another partner, when when a person's been discarded and they've moved on, they're caught up with this new person. Once that shiny new thing starts to fade, which it does because that new person's human as well, then that's when they start circling around to their other sources of previous supply because it's just easy, right? So you might not hear from them for a few months or 6 months, but you generally will within that first year. It'll generally be something. It can be decades later though. Decades. My mother, she was engaged to a guy, I mean, in her early 20s, and she's in her early 70s now. And he was a narcissist, and he'd flat out told, I mean, they were drinking one night and he flat out told her, he was in med school and had told her, basically like, I'm going to just do whatever I want to do. And she'd already sent out invitations to the wedding. I mean, everything. And thankfully she called everything off and, and walked away. Hadn't heard from the guy in like 50 years, 50 years. Had not heard from him. He chats her up on Facebook like nothing had happened. 50 years later. And he's married, I should add. And so she had texted me and said, this is so strange. And I forget his name. We'll call him Chris. Chris had texted me or messaged me, and she's like, and so she'd messaged him back because it was sort of like, oh, wow, hey, like, how are you? And then realized he was married and he'd given her this whole song and dance that his wife is okay with him having female friends and with them talking, and that he was planning a trip and maybe he could visit her when he's out there. And my mom finally said, she's like, she realized, she's like, this is not appropriate. Like, he's a married man. Like, he does not need to be chatting up ex-girlfriends on Facebook. And even though his wife may be okay with it, which she's probably not, but even if she is, my mom realized, she's like, she's not okay with it, So yes. So the answer is they can come back, and they often do come back at any time. You just got to keep your emotional shields up and don't be shocked if they do come back, and realize that because they do often come back to not let that rattle you and not think that it somehow means something, because it doesn't. It's just them trying to see if you're still willing to play their game and if they can still use you for something. JJ Bench says, do you think narcissists believe they love you even though they don't, while sociopaths know from the get-go that they feel nothing but contempt for you? That's a great question. That's a great question. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. I guess I could see that. See, the thing is, though, with narcissists and sociopaths, they both have very shallow emotions. So could they think that they, and I just speculating here, but could they think to themselves, I really love Jane. Yeah, they might, but they also, like, to them, their love for Jane is the same as their love for, barbecue, which is the same as their love for their children, which is the same as their love for, their brand new lawnmower, which is the same as their love for their job. I mean, it's kind of all the same. Like, there's not a lot of depth there. This is why they up and leave, and they do the things that they do, and they're so impulsive because, if your level of love, if the depth of you love your spouse is the same as like you love barbecue, like that's pretty, like, if pizza comes along and you like pizza and you're in the mood for pizza, you can kind of disregard barbecue pretty quickly. It's kind of the same. So, like, do they love somebody? I guess what I'm saying is they might even really believe that they do, quote unquote, love somebody, but their concept of love lacks the depth and the connection that other, like, quote unquote, normal people have. So we might be using this, they might be using the same words, but their actions show otherwise, because it's very quickly, it goes from that idealized to the devalue to the discard. Or I should say, at least very quickly, from the idealized to the devalue. So it's sort of, once they realize that their partner, this other person, is a human being, it's not this fantasy, right? Because everybody looks amazing for like the first 30 days or so of knowing them, right? Like the sex is amazing, their stories are funny, they're like, or entertaining, their jokes are funny. Like everybody's on their best behavior for like the first month to 3 months. But then that's when we see stuff, right? That's when we start realizing, like, oh, they might drink a little more than we're okay with, or they look totally different without makeup on, or they, like this, whatever. People become comfortable after a certain period of time, and then you see them for who they really are, like physically and personality wise. And when that starts to happen with a narcissist, when they realize this person isn't this fantasy, that this person has, thoughts and feelings and hopes and dreams and fears and the whole thing, then the illusion begins to fade, as does their love, because they never loved us. They loved the fantasy. Even though they're selling us this fairy tale, they're selling it to themselves too, a lot of the time. Sociopaths, it's, definitely that they are like the emotional con men. They know what they're doing. And so, I think a lot of times for them, there is no feeling there. It's they say what they need to say in order to get what they want to get. Like online scammers, it to me is I think most relatable and easy to understand example of a sociopath in action. When you've got somebody that's preying upon, handicapped people, or, disabled people, or widows, or these kinds of things, telling them everything that they want to hear with these hopes of this amazing relationship. The whole time they're just extorting as much money from them as they possibly can. Like, that's a whole, that like doesn't get much lower than that. And there is no remorse. Like, it's a big game to them. And of course they justify it thinking like, oh, well, they should have known better, or haha, it's their fault. It's their fault they got scammed, is the justification in a sociopath's mind when it comes to stuff like that. So, but really good question. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Kai Cools asked a question. Dana, can you talk about consequences for not accepting gifts? The gift wasn't taken. Mother-in-law did the silent treatment whilst visiting last weekend. It was so uncomfortable. 10 minutes after she left, I feel like there are flying monkeys coming. Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of the double-edged sword, right? With a manipulator. Like, because if you take the gift, it's going to come with strings attached. And if you don't take the gift, then you're going to have consequences and you're going to have hell to pay. So I guess it's sort of like picking which evil you want to deal with. And if she's a mother-in-law, then whatever you're doing, when you're dealing with a manipulative person, especially if it's family and you're married, to have that understanding with your spouse that you two are a unified front, right? So this manipulative person, whether it's a mother-in-law or whether it's your 16-year-old, is not going to divide and conquer. They're not going to play that game. You're not going to allow that. You guys are on the same page. So if you say no, your husband says no. If your husband says no, then you say no. Like, you guys back each other up. You're a unified front. It's, you guys have one voice when it comes to certain major decisions, right? And if you have two voices, if you have two different opinions on that, you go behind closed doors, you go out with, you sit down over a glass of wine and you figure it out. But you make sure that whenever you're dealing with a manipulative person, that you're a unified front. And you don't let this manipulative person know that you're not. Like, as far as they know, you guys are one voice, and no means no. So your husband needs to be backing you up. If it's his mother and she's doing stuff like that and she's triangulating and pot spinning and all that, then you guys need to be on the same page, and hopefully that behavior will stop. But realizing that's part of the thing with boundaries is, all we can do with setting boundaries is setting them. Then you let go, because we don't have control over other people. And odds are, with emotional manipulators, they're gonna keep coming. They're gonna keep pushing those boundaries. They're gonna keep trying. And all you can do is just hold your ground and not cave in. It's a lot like dealing with a child, and then having some sort of consequence. So if she's really just, off the chain and creating trouble in your marriage, for you guys to have the mentality of, we are married. Like, this relationship, our marriage comes first, right? Because it does. That's the point of getting married, right? Like, you have this marriage, that's your new family, not your mother, not your father. It's you and your husband, right? So getting that priority in order is a big one. And then if she still continues to cause trouble with your marriage, then to talk to your husband and be like, we need to work on something here, because this is not working for me. And we need to take it up a notch. We need to figure something out. So, and whatever that might mean, I don't know. It's between you guys. Let's see. Shania says, Dana, I find myself missing my ex narcissist, even though I know he is evil and I knew he was bad. And I think that's what attracted me to the image of the powerful villain. Why are girls attracted to bad guys? That is a good question. And I don't know if girls are, women in general, women, are necessarily attracted to bad men. I think some are, just like some are attracted to smart guys, or funny guys, or tall guys, or short guys, or, blonde guys, or bald guys, or whatever. Everybody's got their type. My guess is it wasn't his badness. It wasn't his abusiveness that was attractive. It was more of he probably seemed very in control and very take charge. And for a lot of women, that's attractive. And I mean, that can be a very attractive there's nothing wrong necessarily with those traits. It's how those traits are, how they manifest. So a person can be very take charge, very assertive, very much a go-getter, and not be abusive. So I guess I would encourage you to kind of get clear on what exactly were you attracted? Because it probably wasn't that he was a powerful villain. I hope not. Because that's yikes. So to get clear on that and see. And maybe an interesting exercise for you might be to go through your past, maybe let's say 3 or 4 relationships, and write down 3 to 5 things as to what attracted you to him, and then 3 to 5 things as to why that relationship ended, and see if there's a pattern there. So, and she says, I read an article saying that women are genetically attracted to bad boy types. I disagree with that. I think if we're talking about, again, it depends on like your definition of bad boy. If we're talking about like alpha males versus beta males, a lot of women tend to be more attracted to alpha males. If we're talking about like genetically speaking, right? Women tend to be attracted genetically to men that come across as a good provider. So like we're talking like base level of attraction, right? So you've got men that tend to be very testosterone is what you're attracted to. That take charge, I can hunt, I can gather resources, I can protect you, I am, virile, I can get you pregnant, like I am a man, hear me roar, kind of a thing, right? Women tend to be attracted to more of like the alpha males when they're younger, and then actually when they're older they tend they might have already had children, they tend to be more attracted to like the beta males, the guys that stick around and help with child raising and that are the good kind men that that but I mean, I don't know, that whole argument, it's interesting how accurate that really is. I don't know. Again, I think different people are attracted to different things. Cecilia says, I found myself attracted to nice guys. I agree. I mean, for me, it's, I am not attracted to like a bad boy type. I'm attracted to intelligence. I'm attracted to great conversation. I am attracted to, some degree of confidence. I'm not into the whole bravado and the machismo of a lot of narcissists. Like that's a huge turnoff. I'm not into materialism. I'm not into, you know, not into like cliche, like not into a guy just because he has tattoos or rides a Harley. Like there has to be more depth there. Like those things aren't bad or good. They just are for me. Some women really love tattoos and a Harley, and of course, right, like guys that have tattoos and a Harley may or may not be quote unquote bad guys. They're just guys with tattoos and a Harley. Like there's plenty of men out there that look like that are perfectly nice men. So again, it kind of depends what you mean by bad guys and to what extent. Marie says, "Are all hot guys narcs?" That's a really interesting question. No, I don't think so. I think you'll find that a lot of people, male and female, will say that at first they weren't even attracted to this narcissist, male or female. That because it tends to not necessarily be so much their physical looks, it's their confidence. I mean, that's like with anybody, right? Like you could be totally gorgeous or like just handsome, but if they don't have the personality or if they don't have the confidence, then they might have been like a 10, but then the personality and the lack of confidence like sinks it down to a 5 or a 6 or even like a 2. I mean, I can't be around. To me, it's if there's no personality there, if there's no click or chemistry with that, then it's a 0. Like it doesn't matter how gorgeous they are. If there's no connection, there's no connection, and I there's nothing there for me. I think a lot of people are like that, but yeah, a lot of people aren't attracted to him at first. I was not attracted to Jack when I first met him at all, but it was his personality. He was funny, he was witty, he was intelligent. He we I mean, we had amazing conversations. It was getting to know the I fell in love with that mask. Like that one mask was amazing. And that was what got me. It wasn't his looks by any stretch. So let's see. Let me me scroll up. Marie says, I haven't talked to my ex in 10 years. We recently started chatting, but he takes a week to answer me. And he's very vague when we talk about getting together. Is he baiting me? I don't know if he's baiting you, but I think he's not very interested, right? So men and women, like when we're interested in somebody, especially men, will pursue them. Like there generally isn't this wondering of anything. Like men tend to, if they're interested, they will text you, they will call you, they will make an effort. They don't wait a week, and they're not vague about getting together. So it's like he's kind of keeping you on the back burner. You know, I don't know. My 2 cents would be like cut bait and drive on, because you don't need that. Like you're not somebody's plan C or D, like you're worthy of being somebody's plan A, and you're not this guy's plan A. And so for that reason, I would encourage you to just drive on. Yes. I'm going to butcher this name. We'll just call you Guzman. Guzman says a physical 10 means nothing if their personality, or they have something going on that prevents them from having a healthy relationship. Absolutely. I mean, it's eye candy is eye candy, but it's not. Eye candy does not a relationship make, right? I mean, it's like it's one dimensional. It's all you get. So yeah, you're important. So this is the whole, back to the ex coming around, and I don't know. Did you guys just see that? Like something that was weird. Okay. Anyways, what was I saying? That was really strange. Something just like flew in front of the screen, but I didn't see anything. Like I just saw it on the monitor. That was really strange. That was so strange. I lost my train of thought. I don't know. I was just going to say being somebody's backup plan. Oh, treating yourself with value. This is about valuing your, yourself, your time, and your emotions, and realizing and what that means. So hold on a second. Let me scroll up and stop the chat here. So people say that, right? That phrase is thrown around so much. You have to love yourself, right? And we're like, oh, yes, we've got to love ourselves. We all know that's important. We've got to love ourselves. Right? But what does that mean? And what that means is loving yourself means treating yourself with value and respect, and treating your time with value and respect, and treating your money with value and respect, and treating your body with value and respect, and treating your emotions with value and respect. It's kind of this whole picture. And so if you're in doubt as to what that means, because especially for those of us, right, who have gone through a relationship or a dynamic of any kind with an emotional manipulator, we have a hard time. Our baseline for normal tends to be skewed. So if we don't know what normal is, right, then we might think, oh yeah, I love myself, I value myself and my time. But then we find ourselves doing, and I have done it before too. I'm guilty of it too, where we disrespect ourselves. We disrespect our time by this kind of stuff, right? So an ex-boyfriend or ex-husband or whoever comes up out of the blue, all of a sudden now we're on the back burner. We're plan C or D. We're not a priority. He's taken forever to text us back. It's very clear that he's not that interested. We really want to see him. We miss him. We find ourselves maybe, being quick to jump into bed with him, or canceling plans, calling in sick to work, whatever, just to meet with this person. All of that is different ways that we're disrespecting ourselves. And so realizing it's like, again, it's one of those things, like once you realize your pattern, because we all have our own pattern of how we value ourselves and how we devalue ourselves. Once you get it, you get it. And you're like, that's what I do. Like, that's how I tend to devalue myself or to not treat myself with dignity and respect. Then you can start doing better. But a lot of us, if this has been our normal behavior, we're hopping into bed with anybody and everybody, and we don't have, we're just doing that. We're putting, because that's, and I'm not talking about this from like an old fashioned perspective. I'm talking, this is the year 2016. People are nuts, or we're meeting them off the internet. You can't be going back to a stranger's house. You have no idea if you're going to get raped or killed or God only knows what. Like, it's not safe to be putting yourself in harm's way for a one night stand. I mean, it's not being liberated. It's dangerous. So it's, like I said, it's not from an antiquated or old fashioned mindset. It's just from a very practical, like modern mindset of like, y'all we can't be doing that anymore. And then respecting yourself, right? So if a person who's not that interested in you, or maybe you're not even that interested in them, but you're lonely, being like, well, okay, I'll free up my whole Friday night and spend it with them. When it's like, you're not valuing your time. So Marie says, I recently started dating an FBI agent. He used to be a lawyer. I heard those can be psychopaths. Well, maybe. I would encourage you to not link up profession with behavior. Because, and a lot of people do this, and I get it. I get it, right? Because if we've been hurt before, if we're like, okay, I'm trying to avoid psychos, so I want to avoid anything that might be psycho, right? So if I think that, well, I've heard a lot of CEOs are also narcissists, right? Or attorneys, or I don't know, investment bankers, or what have you, or really good looking men, then we might start thinking to ourselves, well, from here on out, I'm going to avoid good looking men that are CEOs. But that's not, there's a difference between causation and correlation. Okay. So causation is a cause and effect. Like, if X, then Y, right? Correlation means that these two things exist at the same time. They may or may not be related. They're there, right? They're loosely related. They're correlated, but they're not, one didn't cause the other. So let me think of a better way to explain this. So even though a lot of narcissists tend to work in certain professions, not all of them do. So this is why it's so important that you can see problematic behavior for what it is, because you could encounter a narcissist who is a janitor, right? Or a narcissist who is a doctor, or a narcissist, or a problematic person who is, any nationality, any religion, any appearance, any income level, anything, because it's the behavior that's problematic, and that behavior doesn't discriminate. It doesn't come across in just one package. It comes across in many different people in many different roles, right? So abusive people can be anything. They can be they can be a significant other, a parent, a child, a friend, a neighbor, a sibling, they can be Catholic or Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or atheist. They come in all different walks of life. They can be male or female. So it's important to see the behavior for what it is. Kevin says, I feel like it's a lot harder for women to just be single and avoid it all completely until they figure out what they want. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They talk about women having a biological clock, and I did not understand, or I kind of made light of that, but there's a lot of truth to that. So, I mean, if you think about it, but biologically, if we're going to have children, there is a window of time like in which that can occur. And so women tend to start feeling that pressure, especially if they're single and they don't have children, and if they want children, when they start getting into their 30s. And obviously even more so if they hit 40, and then they're like, okay, we've got about 3 years. I've got about 3 years to find somebody before to have a baby. And that's pushing it. So women start realizing this pressure, and they make that, there's a term for it called baby rabies, and it's where like women get crazy because they if they really want to have a baby and they don't have one, then they start acting crazy. So yeah, there is a lot of pressure, and it is a lot harder for women to just chill out and get to know themselves, and walk away from relationships that they've been in for any length of time. Whereas men, biologically speaking, they can have children, as long as their equipment works, they can have children. So the pressure, they might still be feeling, that emotional pressure or wanting that connection, but it's not the same. So Shayna says, Dana, I'm sexually frustrated because since I broke up, I haven't dated, and I'm angry at my ex because I know he has a harem, but I'm too afraid to date men again because I'm still traumatized. Well, my dear, there are things that you can do about that. So, with trying to keep this video as PG as possible, I will let your mind wander. But I hopping in the sack with the wrong man is really, it's going to leave you even more sexually frustrated. It really will. It's that instant gratification is just, it's rarely a good thing. It's kind of, it scratches the itch, but then the itch comes back. And there's just a lot to be said for taking time to get to know yourself and being okay with your life before you move forward. And yeah, I get it. Like, it's, it can be hard. It can be hard to be sexually frustrated and be like, okay, now what? But it's better than being emotionally disappointed. I guess if you have to pick one, and again, like I said, there's things that you can do about being sexually frustrated. So there you go. Let's see. Let me scroll. Okay, Melanie says, can you answer my question, please? LOL, when you come upon it. Oh, let's see. Let me see if I can stumble upon it here. Let's see. Let me scroll up. I should also mention this chat doesn't scroll very easily. Oh, here's your question. Is it normal for a narcissist to constantly contact your parent on things he should be contacting me for, which drives me crazy because I told him to stop that? He texts my mom on things related to our child. It's normal for narcissists to push boundaries in any way, shape, or form, because it's all about them and it's whatever they want to do. And he's triangulating you and your mother by doing stuff like that. So I would encourage you to, tell your mom, to say, hey, just say, like, Mom, I'm not comfortable with this. Can you, like, can you set a boundary with him and have him talk to me? Because now there's 3 people in this, and there doesn't need to be 3 people in this, and see what she says. And then again, like, all you can do is voice your concern and then kind of let it go, because you don't have control over your mom. You don't have control over him, and he's doing it to push your buttons. And so, try to just not let it push your buttons, because that's what they do. And again, like, once you accept that, like, this is what he does. This is how he pushes. This is how he tries to push boundaries and gain power and control. It's gonna upset you a lot less once you kind of just accept it. Not saying that you have to like it, but once you just, you know, you're no longer caught off guard by it. Because really the anger with all of us when we're like, this is this person's bad behavior, it's the anger and frustration is because we're in resistance to their bad behavior. We're thinking, you know what, they should be acting differently. We're not accepting them for who they are. Again, this doesn't have to mean that we have to like it, but knowing this is how they act. They yell and they scream when they don't get their way. They push boundaries. They do whatever they do, right? They become violent. They do these things. Once we see them clearly and realize this is what they do, this is their behavior, then we're no longer surprised by it. Once we accept it, then we can start anticipating it. And then all of that emotional energy, that tension, that frustration, that resentment, that irritation, all of that dissipates because we have realized this is who they are. We let go of this idea of how things should be or how things could be, and we accept them for who they are. Again, it sounds like that we're trying to trick ourselves into thinking that the situation's okay. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it's it's the acceptance of what is. We don't have to like it. But fighting against it, wishing things should and could be different, is going to keep that resistance going, and it's not going to solve anything. Because it doesn't matter how much we dislike something. All we can do is try to set a boundary, have consequences with that boundary, and then let go. And if things don't change, then, the only thing left is to change how we are perceiving the situation. And realize that's their behavior, that's on them. And we can choose our response to their behavior. We don't have to get upset. That's a great question. Elise asks, and hello, Elise. These days, I think nearly every man I hear or see about is a narcissist. Will that go away? Yes. If you quit seeing narcissists. Like if you're not around narcissists. So, I think for those of us that are in the mental health field, this is the added challenge, right? Because you have assessment skills. And so it's realizing it's easy to doubt ourselves. It's easy to be like, well, but am I really seeing things clearly? Is it just because of my past, or is it because of my job, or am I reading too much into it, or kind of what's going on? And of course, if you have friends that are not in the mental health field, they're not going to have the assessment skills that you have. But you have, you're reading about all this, you're in this chat, you professionally, you know what you're doing. Like I have faith in your assessment skills, So once our eyes become open to this, once we see what problematic behavior really looks like in motion, right? Which there's an ocean of difference between, reading about it and studying it, and then actually like seeing it on a day-to-day basis, right? It's kind of like what we were talking about before, this idea of what we think abuse looks like and then what abuse really does look like. There's a very big difference there. Once you're able to spot the subtleties of problematic behavior, yes, you are going to start seeing it everywhere because it's everywhere. So, you're just going to be more in tune with it. It can be very discouraging, and it's easy to doubt yourself, and it's easy to think, that you're being hypervigilant about all of this, but really you're not. It's just you're seeing problematic behavior clearly for the first time. So the feelings of paranoia, because having that hypervigilance of kind of questioning whether or not people are wearing masks, and if they are a narcissist, that does go away with time. And it goes away once you reestablish trust in your judgment and in your assessment skills, right? So once you learn to really trust yourself, and this goes back to like what we were talking about earlier with really getting in tune with your thoughts and your feelings, right? With the whole on that spectrum of 0 to 10. So 0 being ice cold, 10 being like, this really juices me. I feel alive. I feel empowered. I feel amazing. Once you kind of get in tune with that, with little things like, like I said earlier, the couch pillows, things that you're not emotionally invested in, it's a lot easier to trust your thoughts and your feelings when it comes to highly emotional situations like dating, right? Because then you'll know, because like you know what a 9 or a 10 feels like, you know what a 5 or a 6 feels like, you know what a 0 or a 1 feels like. And it's just trusting your judgment. And what the sooner you can do that too, a lot of the, for those of you I think that are experiencing the complex PTSD, it really helps to calm that down once you can learn to trust yourself again. Because a lot of the reason that you're in that scramble of the agoraphobia, the paranoia, the wanting to isolate, the not trusting anybody, this is a very normal response to a very abnormal situation. And so it's your brain's way of trying to keep you safe because it can't tell what caused you harm, right? So with normal PTSD, that happens. You have a very distinct cause. You have a very, distinct cause and effect, right? So if you're a soldier at war, or you experience something traumatic like a car accident, or you see somebody being murdered, these kinds of things, cause and effect, very clear. Like, loud sound goes off, you drop and duck and cover, right? With complex PTSD, there's so many elements to an abusive relationship, especially emotional abuse, because it's so insidious. Again, it's not so outward, it's not so overt like physical abuse. So then there's that slow erosion of a person's identity and self-esteem and all of these things. And it takes a while to get that back. It takes a while, if you've experienced a lot of gaslighting, to really trust yourself in your perception of things. But the more you can start proving to your brain, is really what it is, that you can trust your judgment, that you can keep yourself safe, that you can tell the difference between things that, the pain and pleasure, that you know what things are going to put you in harm's way, in identifying problematic behavior that's more subtle, because that's what you're picking up on right now. The more you can start proving to yourself that you got this, like, the more that CPTSD is going to calm down. So it's very, very normal for people to feel this way. I mean, I think there'd be something wrong with us if we didn't feel that way. Because it's a human response to trauma. So because there's like lots of problematic people running around out there, and this kind of what I was saying earlier too, like, transferring that whole emotional scale of how do I feel about 0 to 10, right? Taking that and applying it to people that you may or may not be emotionally invested in. It's a very interesting kind of way to go about people watching. Right. So you can, get a cup of coffee at your local Walmart would be a fantastic people watching place. A cup of coffee at your local Walmart and just sit and watch people and ask yourself, and then kind of looking, what do I think about this person and why? How do I feel about this person and why? Not knowing much about them. And then the why part is what's going to be interesting. Like, they seem to have a good marriage because of XYZ, because he's smiling at his wife and she's holding the little girl's hand, or kind of what have you. It doesn't, obviously we're not going to know if you're right or wrong because it's just a snapshot in time, and you don't know these people, but just observing little snapshots of behavior from people that don't know that you're watching them, it can be very, very telling. And it can really help, I think, you to start observing kind of these micro flashes of character and of personality and motion in your own life. So But it's hard. I mean, it's hard. The more in tune you get with stuff, the once you wake up to this, you can't go back to sleep. It's kind of like the Matrix. So let me scroll up. Cha cha cha. Yes, Martine says, there are such awesome men, Cecilia. Trust me, but you have to be choosy and take your time with somebody. Yep. We all have to. You know, that's the thing when we get into a scramble and we think, oh, it's that attitude of scarcity. Like, oh, I better hurry up. I better hurry. Time clock's ticking. I better hurry up and just pick somebody. It costs us more time in the long run, because if it's not a good decision, then we're going to have to undo it and start over. And maybe we don't do it right now. We're just postponing the inevitable is what it is. So Pro Florence they're talking about Colorado. It says, I was looking at Colorado for land. Yeah, Colorado is beautiful. Beautiful place. There is lots of open land around there for sure. For sure. Let's see, scrolling up. Cecilia says, the last guy offered to let me move in after a week and a half. Major red flag. Yes, it really is. It really, really is. It's hard. I mean, it's hard. It can be hard, especially if we're spending a lot of time, talking with the person where it's like, yes, okay, like it's only been a week, but really we've been on the phone for 10 hours a day, and it seems like it can feel like it's so much longer than it really is. But it's, she says it's going to take time. I'm not going to be impulsive again. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's hard. It can be hard to do, but it's so worth it. It's so worth just going slow. Because if something is real, it will still be there. It'll be there tomorrow. It'll be there next week. It'll be there next month. Let's see. Marie asks again about how do you deal with narcissists at work? Do you ignore them? Do you confront them? That's a great question. I think it depends on a couple of different things. I think it depends on the how problematic they are, and if what the work dynamic is. So you can always try setting a boundary and seeing how that goes. I mean, it all just depends. I mean, it all just depends. So it depends on what kind of behavior they're doing and all of it. I think it's just, this goes back to kind of trusting your judgment, because really at the end of the day, only you know your situation the best. And so it's important that you listen to that. So I could tell you, oh yeah, it's great to have this boundary and set this boundary and this, that, and the other, but sometimes that can make things worse. Just like going no contact isn't always the ideal situation. Sometimes that if you've got a person who is, really dangerous and destructive, and they're really violent, then going no contact or getting a restraining order can sometimes be like waving a red flag in front of a bull. And it's, your situation best, even though you might not think you do, even though you might feel really confused, even though you might totally doubt everything, your judgment, your reality, your everything. Go with your gut feeling about things. But if we're talking about, some obnoxious coworker who's triangulating and gaslighting and doing that, I would say keep a paper trail of everything. Try to limit conversations to email and text. Stay professional. Try to control your response. Have a response, not a reaction. And if you have issues, depending on your company, you could bring stuff up with HR, but making sure that you have as much, info possible there. Bear, hi Bear, says, Dana, please talk about narcissists using restraining orders. Like them putting one on us or us putting one on them. So I guess I'm gonna try to answer your question both ways as when you're typing. Hello. Well, I mean, it just depends with restraining orders. It's just kind of knowing your situation the best, and if somebody, if they're manipulative and they're putting a restraining order on you, right? Like trying to prove a point, all you can do is keep a paper trail of everything, respect the restraining order, and using the law as a slander weapon. Okay. So yeah, you're talking about them putting a restraining order on you. I would say going to great lengths to make sure that your behavior is absolutely squeaky clean and on the level, and not doing anything to potentially violate the restraining order. So you want to come across as, that you're not a danger or a menace, right? That your behavior is not problematic. It's hard. It's so hard because a lot of times the court stuff like that, it's he said, she said. And so all you can do is consistent action over time. So, yeah, Yona says, I love the response in a professional setting. Thank you. Oh, I love that too. The chat just scrolled up. Hold on. She says, thank you for your input. I will take it under advisement. And then just turn your back and go to work. I think that's a beautiful, appropriate, professional response. So I think that's great. JJ says, another question. I've noticed that saying, scroll up. That saying, you hurt my feelings, is a bigger crime to a narcissist than screaming, you're an a-hole. Have you noticed anything like that? Is there a logic to it? I haven't necessarily noticed anything about that, but I think they don't understand that because they don't feel like they don't get it. Like they don't get it because for them, it's all about them. So it's sort of like, well, what do you mean? They just spin everything around because it's all about them. So if we say, you hurt my feelings, they're like, you hurt my feelings. What do you mean? Why is it always about you? Like, what about me? It's crazy making. So I don't think it hurts them to say, you hurt my feelings. That sets them off because they don't feel like that we're entitled to have hurt feelings. Because they feel justified in every single thing that they do. So Marie says, psychopaths have the frontal lobe cortex not activated. There's been studies that show there's different parts of like reduced brain activity in psychopaths. There's an interesting book out there by Dr. Robert Hare, and I'm drawing a blank. It's something about psychopaths, and I cannot remember the title right now, but it's a fantastic book. And he talks about this, how he thinks it's a huge mistake to, the DSM combined the terms sociopath and psychopath and under one umbrella, which is now antisocial personality disorder. And his whole concept is no, they're in his mind, it's like they're very different. Like there's brain scans and there's issues and, you know, but it's not how they're treated. And I think in large part, while he may be correct about that, realistically, the behavior is about the same. And you can't go around like giving people, brain scans and to see like, well, what am I dealing with here? Are you a psychopath or are you a sociopath or, are you a narcissist or kind of what type of poison are you? Like, people that doesn't happen. So, as far from our perspective, as far as we're concerned, it's toxic is toxic is toxic. It doesn't matter if you're drinking bleach or if you're drinking strychnine or if you're drinking, whatever. It's poison is poison is poison. And all we need for our purposes, it's all we need to know is that it's toxic and we just need to stay away from it. But yes, there have been brain scans that show like a reduced activity in areas for empathy. Yes, they have more white matter, gray matter in their brain. So, and keep in mind too that it's, again, like a person just toxic people, there's a whole spectrum. So they may not be a person doesn't have to be like a full out personality, narcissistic personality disorder or antisocial personality disorder in order to be problematic. A person can just be like not your kind of person and be problematic, right? So this kind of goes back to the key out of all of this is to know yourself and to know what you want in your life and to get crystal clear on that for what you want as a partner and then to not settle. So, and to figure out like what, kind of, again, like what's toxic for you. So here's an example. So I have an acquaintance of mine. She she was married to a man who was an alcoholic for decades. And she has 2 children that are both alcoholics. And the rule at her house is there is no alcohol, even if her husband and children are not there. She does not want to be around it, period. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's the 4th of July. It doesn't matter if she's the only one that's not drinking. It doesn't matter. She doesn't want to see it. She doesn't want to smell it. She does not want to be around it. That's toxic for her. She's friends with people that drink. I mean, I drink, but she doesn't want it on her property. For her, it's a trigger. And so that's her right. That's her property. That's her house. That's her rule. So it's just kind of figuring out like what you need to stay safe and sane. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if other people agree with it or not. I mean, here's another example of stuff like you could, if let's say you're Catholic, right? And you decide I only want to date other people that are Catholic. Like they could be the world's nicest person, but if they're atheist or if they're Jewish or if they're Muslim, and in your mind you're like, nope, no, I'm not doing that. I want to date somebody that's Catholic. I want to go to mass every Sunday. I want my children to be baptized Catholic. I want to go to church every Sunday. This is what I want to do. I don't want to compromise on this. That's okay. That's okay. Totally okay. It's wherever your lines in the sand are. So other people might not agree with that, but that's okay because it's other people. Like they can have their own rules for their own life. But if your thing, I like my tolerance for stuff is it's very low. And it's not that I'm intolerant or hypervigilant. It's the healthier I get, the more I just don't want to put up with nonsense. So I'm not looking for a project. I'm looking for a partner. Like I don't want to date somebody that's got, addictions and, all kinds of stuff going on. It doesn't make them bad or wrong. It just means I don't want that in my life. Like I don't want that in my life. So, sort of like for them figure it out, like, and then if it's meant to be, then call me in a year. Like we'll go from there. But so Marie said, my ex covert narcissist waited till we were committed and had a trip planned to Hawaii before he introduced me to his low vibrational ghetto gang banging friends. Yeah, that's, well, if he's got some kind of sketchy friends, it's, birds of a feather flock together kind of a thing. There's a lot of truth to that. In hindsight is always 2020 too, right? So Solution asks, does a narcissist text you asking if you are okay even if they've discarded you? Oh yeah. I mean, they'll text you all kinds of stuff. They might say, I'm so sorry I hurt you. You deserve somebody so much better than me. Or you really are a fantastic person and I'm really sorry things couldn't work out. So they might make it seem like they have all of a sudden they have all this insight and they're cool, calm and collected and they're grounded and they're talking maturely about your relationship, which is kind of a way of making you feel like things could have worked out, right? But then really they're just saying that to make themselves look good and I think too in part to kind of twist the knife and be like, see how calm and mature I really am and how, I'm sorry things couldn't work out. And it makes us think like, well, oh no, now they've had that flash of insight that we've been hanging on for so long for. And now they're going to go live happily ever after with the next person because now they're all fixed. And that's not how that works, right? People don't just change overnight like that. And it's just all part of the manipulation. Yeah. So, okay, guys. Well, I think we need to call it a night. It is late on my end. And I know for some of you, if Martine is still here, it's like early morning for him, like 4 a.m. or something. So, oh, yeah, that's a great point. Elise says, my ex-narc, when he was leaving for good, said, you probably need this extra electric toothbrush for your next boyfriend. I fell for the manipulation and gave it to him. Wish I, now that I didn't. So, yeah, they do that, right? And they'll say things like, all of a sudden they get like really jealous. And when they've been the ones that have been cheating. It's like, oh, I see. Like now you get your hair cut and colored, or I guess you're probably gonna go date a bunch of guys now that you're single, and it's like territorial, and it's bizarre, and it's just weird, and it's nonsense, and it's just trip to crazy town. Like it just, I don't know. You just can't take anything that they say for face value. It's all a manipulation. Martine says, no, it's 6. It's 6 here almost, Dana. Haha. So Kevin says it's almost 4 p.m. here. Yeah. So for those of you who are, if this is your first time here on the chat, I do have a support group. It's free. It's there, and I have 2 of them. One's on my website. One is on Facebook. It just kind of depends on what you're looking for and how much privacy you need. The all of my contact info for the website, for the support groups, for Instagram, for whatever, is all on my about page in YouTube. So if you go there, the group, just real quick on Facebook, it's facebook.com/groups/healing after narcissistic abuse. And it's a great group. There's about 5,000 people in it and growing every day. And it's a great way to get support 24/7. People are in there just around the clock. So I hope to see you guys there. There's a lot of you that are from the support group, so I will be seeing you there shortly because now I'm wide awake and I'm going to go do that for a little bit. So lots of love to you guys. Thank you for a fantastic live stream. Thank you for all of your great questions. And I hope that my 2 cents is able to shed some light on what's going on. And so just lots of love to you guys. You are not alone. You are not crazy, and you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care, and I will see you guys next week, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay, bye.